So let's start. I take the chance by starting by welcoming everybody here in presence and also at distance to this inaugural event of the Children's Rights Academy. I'm Dr. Roberta Ruggiero and I'm the director of the Children's Rights Academy. And I'm particularly honored to start with the welcoming and also to do the honor of the day. We have today 3 hours of presentation and discussions. They are organized on 3 slots, 3 majors, I would say, slots. The first one will be the welcoming and the opening. I would allow you to understand the institutional framework in which the Children's Rights Academy is embedded. The second part will be animated by thematic discussion with the intervention and the contribution of CRA alumni, policymakers, and faculty members. The combination of these 3 actors will allow you to have a better understanding of, I would say, the mission and the vision of the Children's Rights Academy, because the 3 of them contribute all together to development and to the rollout of our program. We move afterwards to a third part that will be opened with an online pool. This remaining last part of the discussion debate will be dedicated to question and answer. For those of you that are in presence, there will be afterwards an aperitif. I'm sorry for those that joined us online today. They won't be able to participate to this convivial moment at the end of the discussion. Without further ado, I'm pleased to pass the microphone, the floor, to Professor Karl Lansen, the director of the Center for Children's Rights Studies of the University of Geneva. Karl, the mic is yours.
Here it is. So, dear Vice Rector of the University of Geneva, Monsieur le Chef du Service des Hautes Écoles du Canton du Valais, dear Director of and collaborators of the Children's Rights Academy, dear colleagues, dear friends. So today we launch the Children's Rights Academy, the entity within the University of Geneva Center for Children's Rights Studies that it is entrusted with the coordination of our continuous education programs. This launch offers a historical moment because indeed we do not every week create an entity that has been prepared with so much energy and vista and that offers so many opportunities to making a lasting impact. And during this event, we will address the question how interdisciplinary and intersectoral studies can advance the protection and promotion of children's rights. Grand historical moments ask for grand metaphors. So instead of inventing new ones, I have chosen 3 popular metaphors from our large stock of images to reflect on the importance of academic continuous education in children's rights studies. I will speak about giants, towers, and bridges. So first are my giants, on whose shoulders we stand, because the Children's Rights Academy is not a sudden creation of a handful of University of Geneva academics who feel it would be great if their abstruse ideas and concepts could make it to the real world. On the contrary, our activities build on the lineage of people who before us in different universities in Europe have sincerely cared about the transmission of normative, empirical, theoretical and practical knowledge about the social and legal position of children and young people in society. Now, I cannot refer to all the giants who have walked this path before us, but I do want to mention a few of them who have been particularly influential for the ideas and practices that have led to the creation of the Children's Rights Academy. Now, the first giant I would like to mention is Miek de Langen, who has been a professor of youth law at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands between 1976 and 1992. In her academic work, Miek de Langen constantly and courageously defended a critical emancipatory perspective on children and young people's rights. She also felt that it was her role as a university professor to break out of the classrooms and to give support to projects that can have meaningful impact in children's lives. She has set up in 1985 in Amsterdam the first children's law clinic that relied on students to give legal advice to children and young people about their rights. Her example has taught us that academic education about children's rights can play an important role for children in society. The second giant is Eugene Verhellen, who was a professor of child and youth protection and social work at Ghent University in Belgium from 1983 to 2002. Eugene, who has also been my PhD director, adopted a broad humanistic approach to the Children's Rights Project. And he constantly brought that project into dialogue with larger social evolutions that concern the changing image of children and childhood, the internationalization of human rights, and its implications for social policies concerning children and youth. He was director of Ghent University's Children's Rights Center, and he has shown there how to develop a large portfolio in continuous education, including post-academic training programs, summer schools, and an international interdisciplinary course in children's rights. Eugene Verhellen has also contributed to theorizing the academic responsibilities in children's rights. For him, continuous education programs must contribute to improving children's development and their quality of life by paying attention to the opportunities and strategies for professionals and social practices that are in a position to constructively apply new knowledge in children's rights. The third giant comes more from the south. Angelo Saporuti, who was a professor in sociology at the University of Molise in Italy, and he has been the PhD director of Roberta Ruggiero, the director of the Children's Rights Academy. Professor Saporuti has shown the relevance of social science for the field of children's rights studies. Through his active participation between 1987 and 1992 in the international project Childhood as a Social Phenomenon, Angelo Saporuti has contributed to making strong ties between the interdisciplinary fields of childhood studies and children's rights studies. His academic entrepreneurship led him to creating an interdisciplinary PhD program in children's rights promotion and protection. Now, although this PhD program has unfortunately been discontinued, the existence in the past gives us today the opportunity to reflect on the broad range of continuous education that can be developed. And above all, Angelo Saporuti infected all of us who have known him with his gentle manner, optimistic spirit, and sense of humor. From him, we have learned that you cannot successfully run a continuous education program without having some fun at the same time. The fourth giant lives in Switzerland. Is Jean Zermatten, who has served during 25 years from 1980 to 2005 as a juvenile judge, the first in the canton of Fribourg, then in his home canton of Valais. The combination of his work as a judge with his involvement in national and international professional associations and his academic teaching gave rise to the creation in 1995 of the International Institute for the Rights of the Child, IDE, in Sion. IDE has been a pioneering entity with a powerful driving force in the person of its director, Jean Zermatten, who multiplied initiatives aimed at raising awareness and to train professionals in the field of juvenile justice, child protection, and children's rights. Under the impetus of Jean Zermatten, IDE has been at the forefront of the creation of several university programs that continue to exist today, including the Master of Advanced Studies in Children's Rights, which has been running since 2003, and that is today the flagship program of the Children's Rights Academy. For his work, Jean Zermatten received an honorary doctorate from the University of Fribourg first in 2007. That was at the moment when that university was involved as an academic partner in the master. But he also in 2014 received an honorary doctorate from the University of Geneva. That was at the time when the Center for Children's Rights Studies was being set up. Jean Zermatten's work and the awards received for that work demonstrates that continuing education in children's rights can be a very prestigious academic undertaking. Now, without the giant's creativity, commitment, critical reflections, and pioneering initiatives, there would be no launching event of the Children's Rights Academy at the University of Geneva today. Now, I now turn to my second metaphor, towers. Now, in my tower metaphor, I want to emphasize how the academic tower can function as a lighthouse that serves as a beacon for analyzing and understanding the world. Researchers who work at higher education institutions in the field of children's rights studies frequently ask what the social relevance of their academic work is. Has our work at the university contributed to making changes in child welfare services, child rights legislation, or childhood and youth policies? At the end, does what happens in the tower make a difference in children's lives? Over the last 2 decades, calls to demonstrate how academic activities have contributed to improving society have drastically increased in all scientific fields and for universities in general. This might be seen as excellent news for university departments and research centers in the field of children's rights that indeed have a long tradition to making sure that their research contributes to improving children's position in society. The social relevance of children's rights studies is relatively undisputed amongst the field's professionals, policymakers, child service providers, education professionals, as well as the general public. Children's rights studies are seen as a socially useful, and one might describe the field's relative academic success, at least in part, to its precursory role in social relevant education and research. In a position paper of the League of European Research Universities, that position paper explains the growing demand on higher education institutions to show their societal impact. The paper points at the dramatically changing contexts in which universities operate. There are the consequences of globalization, the dynamics of the knowledge society in a neoliberal economic environment and its prioritization of economic growth and job creation, as well as various global social challenges, such as climate change, migration, and political insecurity. In other words, the same globalization patterns and their related power dynamics that have consequences for children in childhood everywhere have also impacted children's rights studies and higher education alike. There is a lot of attractivity in a simplistic linear model of knowledge production that asks universities to produce knowledge that can be as prompt as possible made useful for the economy or that can contribute to solving urgent social problems. For instance, through continuous education programs. However, asking universities only to respond to societal challenges is in tension with the institution's academic autonomy and independence needed for curiosity-driven research. From within children's rights studies, self-reflective perspectives have emerged that critically engage with the context in which children's rights practices are produced and applied. Me and some of my colleagues are often worried about the field's slow theoretical advancements or the little influence it has on academic debates within social sciences and humanities more generally. Even if research and education on children, childhood and children's rights is attractive for universities because of the field's social utility and the growing demand from the professional world, universities' academic responsibility includes the task to training future generations of thinkers, policymakers, and problem solvers, and to therefore stay sufficiently detached from day-to-day questions and problems. We need a tower from where to observe from a distance as much as we need a city full of life and the world where you can see the world from within. A city needs a tower as much as a tower needs a city. But most of all, we need elevators and staircases to endlessly move from the city to the tower, from the tower to the city, and then back again. Now, critique on the importance universities should attach to the social impact of their education and research often hints at market logics that lie behind such demands. The entrepreneurial university has been criticized for being too much influenced by the market logic that aims to maximize research and education's economic value, and that stands in contrast to intellectual curiosity, academic freedom, and the quest for knowledge as providing the basis for culture, civilization, and education. Is there sufficient room for children's rights research and education that is critical of the categories of thinking employed in childhood and youth policy? Can education and research be interested in the study of children and childhood for the mere sake of knowledge itself, rather than because there is a need for it? Furthermore, if the aim is to have profound, long-lasting societal impact, the most important work would be to engage with the forms of thought and categories and concepts in which we think about children and children's rights. In other words, the highest level of purchasing societal impact would be to turn away from short-term social impact, but engage with the slow work needed to think through epistemological frameworks that potentially have the strongest impact of all. The Center for Children's Rights Studies aims at having both long and term social impact. The challenge for the continuous education programs offered by the Children's Rights Academy is indeed how to combine the quest for having direct short to middle term social impact through participation in policy-oriented research, dialoguing with the field through continuous education programs, but how to combine that with the other similarly important ambition to produce critical, curiosity-driven knowledge that engages with the categories in which we think about children's rights. And that can also explain these phenomena by relating them to social and economic power structures. We are strongly convinced that both short-term and long-term goals should be and can be achieved together. My last metaphor are bridges. These stand for the ambition of continuous education to bridge theory and practice. I give the word to a former student of our Master of Advanced Studies in Children's Rights who is a senior officer working for a UN agency that deals with children's rights. In a recent testimony about the program, he explains the importance of bridges between practice and theory. He said, "Now, this program allowed me to put a theory behind the operational part of my work. I have been dealing with children's rights in a very operational way, running projects in different regions of the world. But I never really had the time to focus on what is the theory behind the actions that we engage on. And the master really gave me this opportunity. Understanding theory is very important to advance children's rights. For instance, it enables us to be so more convincing when we talk with our stakeholders and constituents. There is no ideal endpoint where theory and practice harmoniously meet. The importance is walking over the bridges that allow theory to learn from practice and practice to engage with theory. Like elevators and staircases, bridges make it possible to endlessly move from one point to another." By the way, I was wondering, do you know the difference between theory and practice? Maybe you know this one. Theory is when something doesn't work, but you know why it doesn't work. Whereas practice is when something works, but even if you don't know why it works, it just works. And then there's a third option. When something doesn't work and you don't know why it doesn't work. So what to do then? So if that is the case, let's say it doesn't work, you don't know why, I think you are desperately in need to participate in one of the continuous education programs and activities offered by the Children's Rights Academy. So I wish you all a very interesting seminar to further explore the relation between children's rights studies and the advancement of the protection and promotion of children's rights. And above all, I wish the Children's Rights Academy all the best in its future endeavors. So I thank you very much.
Karl, thanks very much for your thoughts and for, I would say, the past, the present, and the future of the Children's Rights Academy. Indeed, without having had the chance to meet with those giants, I'm sure beyond any doubt that we wouldn't be here today, because indeed we managed to cultivate our interest and knowledge on children's rights because of working with these people you mentioned. Without further ado, I switch in French et je donne la parole à la vice-rectrice de l'Université de Genève, la professeure Micheline Louis Courvoisier. Merci encore d'avoir accepté notre invitation aujourd'hui.
Merci à vous de m'avoir invitée parce que je suis très heureuse de faire partie de ce moment historique, comme le soulignait Karl. Je suis bien convaincue qu'il est historique et que ça donnera une très longue vie à l'Académie. Donc, chers collègues, enfin, mesdames et messieurs, chers collègues, chers partenaires et chers amis, donc c'est avec un grand plaisir que nous vous accueillons plus exactement, aujourd'hui pour le lancement officiel de la Children's Rights Academy, qui regroupe les programmes et activités de formation continue du Centre interfacultaire en droit de l'enfant, qu'on appelle plus intimement le CID, de l'Université de Genève. La Children's Rights Academy s'intègre dans l'offre de notre formation continue de l'Université de Genève. En effet, nous avons 9 facultés et 4 centres interfacultaires qui offrent des programmes de formation continue qui s'adressent à un large public, actif dans le monde du travail et proposent à peu près 400 formations, soit courtes, soit des formations diplômantes qui sont plus longues, comme les CAS, les DAS et les MAS. Et ces 400 formations sont regroupées à travers 12 thématiques. Et ces formations sont suivies par environ 10 000 participants par année. La formation continue universitaire est au service des professionnels d'aujourd'hui et de demain. Et à ce titre, elle propose à ces professionnels des formations pertinentes, innovantes et basées sur les dernières découvertes de la recherche universitaire et intégrant les pratiques d'experts des milieux professionnels. Et c'est là que je vois la question du pont dont tu parlais, parce que c'est clairement une rencontre entre le terrain, les besoins professionnels, mais aussi la recherche académique qui nous permet d'être particulièrement originaux, en tout cas on l'espère. Les formations continues de notre université répondent donc aux besoins de formation des secteurs publics et privés et de la société en général et permettent à tous de se spécialiser, d'acquérir de nouvelles compétences, de se réorienter, c'est de plus en plus important de pouvoir se réorienter, ou de se développer au niveau personnel dans une optique d'employabilité. Dans un contexte de mutation, tu en as parlé, Karl, de mutation environnementale, économique, sociale, entre autres, dans lequel les compétences doivent sans cesse être remises à jour, la formation continue universitaire ouvre des nouveaux champs de réflexion et d'action pour nos sociétés contemporaines. Nourrie par la recherche universitaire et les dialogues avec la cité, elle enrichit la pratique professionnelle en répondant aux attentes de qualification des participants et aux besoins du marché, de l'emploi et de la société. Nos programmes de formation continue sont créés et mis à jour, notamment en fonction de l'analyse des besoins exprimés par nos partenaires. On fait une veille extrêmement sérieuse sur ce qu'attendent nos partenaires et les différents acteurs économiques et politiques. Mais ces programmes trouvent leurs fondamentaux dans les résultats de recherche des facultés et des centres. Bénéficiant de partenariats tissés avec les institutions locales, nationales et internationales, ils visent à renforcer les compétences des professionnels qui doivent être transférables dans les institutions et dans les entreprises. Nos programmes ont des qualités spécifiques, du moins nous l'espérons, telles que la pertinence, le partenariat, l'interdisciplinarité, très important aussi, la collaboration, l'adéquation pédagogique. On fait souvent des pilotes pédagogiques dans le cadre des formations continues avant de les implanter dans le cadre de la formation de base, la reconnaissance et l'évaluation, et donc la qualité, extrêmement importante aussi. Ces programmes sont flexibles, innovants, adaptés aux besoins des professionnels. Ils sont réalisés sous la responsabilité académique des professeurs des facultés, c'est ça qui fait leur originalité. Mais ils s'enrichissent aussi de l'expertise des praticiens et des praticiennes qui assurent certains des enseignements qui sont donnés et qui sont aussi invités dans les instances de direction des formations, ce qui est très important parce qu'ils peuvent donner une impulsion qui leur est bien propre. Ainsi, les programmes et activités de formation continue de la Children's Right Academy sont centrés sur celui qui veut apprendre et qui veut se former et se spécialiser et s'appuient sur des méthodes pédagogiques stimulantes. Ils font parfois appel aux technologies de l'information et de la communication quand c'est nécessaire. L'internationalisation des programmes de formation continue permet l'acquisition de compétences interculturelles, très très important aussi, et d'une pensée critique et ouverte. Ça fait 400 ans qu'on s'y attelle et j'espère qu'on va toujours continuer. Elle représente une ouverture à d'autres horizons et l'opportunité de comprendre les enjeux du monde. La création de la Children's Right Academy s'inscrit dans la stratégie d'internationalisation de l'UNIGE. Cette stratégie se décline tant localement par une internationalisation des formations proposées ou par le développement de relations étroites avec les organisations internationales et les organisations non gouvernementales basées à Genève. On a un tissu très très particulier pour ça, bien sûr, ainsi que sur la scène mondiale, entre autres par le développement de partenariats et d'échanges avec d'autres universités. Pour garantir la qualité de ses offres de formation, de sa recherche et pour sa visibilité, l'université n'a cessé de développer sa présence sur la scène internationale par des collaborations interuniversitaires, je pense à la LERU en particulier, et par son action au sein des différents réseaux universitaires. Dans le champ des études en droit de l'enfant, la Children's Right Academy pourra bénéficier de l'appui du réseau de Children's Right European Academic Network, et je pense que c'est absolument capital aussi, dont la coordination est assurée par le CID, On est très reconnaissant pour ça. La participation active du CID et de la Children's Rights Academy, je pense utiliser le petit nom, la CRA, c'est pas très joli, donc je le dis tout beau, dans ce réseau universitaire autour des droits de l'enfant, contribue, et j'en suis vraiment convaincue, à augmenter la visibilité de l'expertise de notre Centre des droits de l'enfant, de l'université bien sûr, dans les domaines des études de l'enfance, des droits de l'enfant et encore des droits humains. En tant qu'unité d'enseignement et de recherche de l'Université de Genève, le Centre interfacultaire en droits de l'enfant est un service public dédié à l'enseignement supérieur de base et approfondi, à la recherche scientifique fondamentale et appliquée, et à la formation continue dans le champ interdisciplinaire en études des droits de l'enfant. Je peux en témoigner parce que dans notre commission interfacultaire de la formation continue, ça a toujours été très actif et un moteur pour nous, et ce sera la même chose avec Roberta, j'en suis sûre. À travers le développement et la diffusion des connaissances empiriques et théoriques, tu nous en as beaucoup parlé juste tout à l'heure, sur les droits de l'enfant et le renforcement de la réflexion critique sur ces enjeux normatifs, ainsi que sur les implications d'une épistémologie inter- et transdisciplinaire, le CID apporte une contribution significative à la valorisation de la position des enfants et de l'enfance dans la société et au respect de leurs droits fondamentaux. Je suis absolument convaincue que la Children's Rights Academy va contribuer à renforcer les connaissances et les compétences des professionnels travaillant dans le domaine des droits de l'enfant, tout en favorisant une réflexion critique, une connaissance empirique et une curiosité toujours renouvelée. J'aimerais exprimer toute ma reconnaissance et celle du rectorat à Karl, professeur Hanson, et à Roberta Ruggiero pour cette initiative, pour la création de cette académie qui est extrêmement importante pour nous, et je lui souhaite une très longue vie, bien entendu, et je vous souhaite à vous une belle après-midi parce que le programme a l'air très, très alléchant. J'aimerais m'excuser parce que je vais devoir partir très vite. Je m'en excuse parce que ça m'aurait fait très plaisir de participer et de vous écouter cet après-midi. Je vous remercie.
Merci Madame la vice-rectrice pour ces mots d'encouragement pour la suite, l'avenir de la CRA. Effectivement, c'est mieux, je le prononce en anglais, c'est plus joli qu'en français, l'acronyme. Et pour le bienvenue à la Children's Rights Academy au sein de l'Université de Genève. Je passe tout de suite la parole à Monsieur Yves Ray, chef du service des hautes écoles du canton du Valais, auprès du département économie et formation. Merci d'être ici avec nous aujourd'hui.
Merci aussi à vous de m'avoir invité cet après-midi pour ce moment ô combien important quand on a la chance de pouvoir fêter la création d'un centre, d'une institution, d'un institut ou autre. C'est toujours un moment extrêmement privilégié. Donc j'ai énormément de plaisir à être parmi vous et vous adresser quelques mots pour le lancement du Children's Rights Academy. C'est vrai que c'est un moment, comme il a été dit par Madame la vice-rectrice, c'est un moment important pour l'Université de Genève, mais c'est aussi un moment important pour le canton du Valais, hein, parce que vous le savez, le CID est basé depuis fort longtemps. Ça a été mentionné tout à l'heure par Karl Hanson, les impacts majeurs qui ont été faits par Jean Zermatten notamment, mais toutes les personnes qui ont œuvré autour de Jean Zermatten. Et c'est vrai que la présence même de l'Université de Genève et du CID en particulier sur le territoire valaisan est un outil absolument fondamental pour le développement de notre canton sous l'angle académique et pas uniquement sous l'angle des technologies, car comme vous le savez, le Valais a beaucoup évolué ces 30 dernières années avec le développement des institutions de type tertiaire, la HS en particulier, mais également l'arrivée progressive des instituts universitaires, l'Uni de Genève, respectivement l'Uni de Lausanne, mais également les PFL Valais-Wallis. Et ce développement, il se fait beaucoup sous l'angle de la partie technologique, la partie sciences dures, entre guillemets, mais il est aussi extrêmement important pour notre canton d'investir non pas uniquement dans les technologies, dans l'innovation au travers de l'innovation industrielle et technologique, mais il est également extrêmement important de poursuivre l'investissement sur le capital humain et donc l'importance aussi de disposer de centres d'excellence autour des sciences sociales et humaines est un élément extrêmement important pour notre canton. La création de cette Children's Rights Academy rentre aussi dans le cadre du développement que l'on veut au niveau du canton du Valais sur la mission de formation continue. Comme vous le savez toutes et tous, hein, dans le monde du higher education, les deux missions principales sont essentiellement la recherche, qu'elle soit fondamentale ou appliquée, respectivement la formation de base de niveau bachelor, master et ensuite recherche via le doctorat. La formation continue, c'est une mission qui est souvent relativement peu soit développée, mais en tout cas reconnue au sein des institutions. Dans le cadre du canton du Valais, j'ai la chance depuis 2 ans maintenant de pouvoir d'avoir pu récupérer, entre guillemets, si vous me permettez l'expression, la mission formation continue dans le cadre des missions du service d'autres écoles. Cette mission était initialement rattachée à un autre service du département et depuis 2 ans, nous avons récupéré au sein du service d'autres écoles la mission formation continue. Et c'est vrai que c'est une chance énorme, je pense, de pouvoir intégrer la dimension formation continue dans une politique des hautes écoles et dans une politique globale d'éducation et de formation tout au long de la vie, parce que ce soit à titre personnel, mais également à titre institutionnel, ça a été dit aussi tout à l'heure, tant par Karl Hanson que par Madame la vice-rectrice, cette mission formation continue est une mission qui fait le lien entre les différents partenaires et qui fait vraiment qui permet de pouvoir développer toute une série d'applications pratiques au sein des différents bénéficiaires. Donc le canton du Valais, dans sa politique cantonale d'éducation tout au long de la vie, veut mettre en place tout ce dispositif et veut accompagner tout ce dispositif de développement de programmes pour l'ensemble de la société, pas uniquement dans le cadre de missions de type haute école. Notre ambition dans notre politique valaisanne, c'est de pouvoir, au travers de différents outils, j'en ai tout à l'heure, de pouvoir accompagner tant les prestataires de formation que les bénéficiaires, voire même les employeurs ou les institutions qui veulent développer de la formation continue, de pouvoir les accompagner avec différents outils cadres qui ont été, que l'on développe. Le premier outil, c'est un outil qui s'appelle, de par son petit nom, le Fonds cantonal de formation continue des adultes. C'est un outil qui est extrêmement intéressant parce que, comme vous le savez, dans le cadre de la formation continue, un des enjeux premiers, c'est le financement. Qu'on le veuille ou pas, c'est des missions qui n'est malheureusement pas soutenues par des fonds publics, au même titre que la formation de base ou la recherche. Et donc, un des enjeux qu'il y a pour les institutions tertiaires, mais également pour toute autre institution, c'est de pouvoir avoir un modèle d'affaires qui soit financièrement équilibré. Ce que l'on a développé dans le cadre de la politique cantonale, c'est via ce fonds cantonal pour la formation continue des adultes. C'est un outil où les communes valaisannes, les partenaires sociaux valaisans, respectivement le canton du Valais, injectent à peu près entre 900 000 francs et 1 million de francs par année pour soutenir les différents acteurs en matière de formation continue. Et en l'occurrence, l'Université de Genève, respectivement le Children's Rights Academy, sera éligible à ces différents fonds que l'on met à disposition. C'est des fonds qui permettent d'impulser de nouvelles idées. Et si je fais le lien aussi avec ce qui a été dit tout à l'heure par Madame la vice-rectrice, un des challenges qu'il y a lorsqu'on fait de la formation continue, c'est de pouvoir passer de l'idée vers la pratique, vers l'implémentation. Et tout cet investissement qui est extrêmement important par les différents acteurs est quasiment jamais financé. Et avec les outils qu'on a mis en place, via des demandes d'appel de fonds, les institutions valaisannes peuvent accéder à ces différents financements et peuvent, en l'occurrence, pouvoir soutenir de la pédagogie innovante, pouvoir soutenir des démarches de communication, peuvent soutenir des différentes démarches de digitalisation de la formation continue. Et ça permet d'enlever une partie de la pression qui sont sur l'institution pour développer toute une série de cours ou pas. Ces outils-là, on les veut vraiment dans une démarche qui est une démarche la plus flexible possible. Ça a été également dit tout à l'heure par mes préopinants, l'enjeu de la formation continue, c'est de sortir un petit peu des carcans traditionnels de cours que l'on connaît dans une formation initiale. Bien entendu, vous avez les CAS, les DAS, les MAS, mais ce qui est encore le plus important à nos yeux, à mes yeux en particulier, c'est de pouvoir mettre en place des systèmes qui ne sont pas toujours et systématiquement certifiants. Et on le voit au travers de ce séminaire cet après-midi, ça s'inscrit totalement aussi dans une logique non certifiante, mais de partage entre experts, de partage entre collègues et d'éducation et de formation tout au long de la vie. Et ça, c'est aussi des éléments qui sont extrêmement importants et que l'on va continuer à soutenir dans le cadre de nos travaux que l'on fait dans le cadre du canton. Dernière illustration de ce que l'on met en place depuis 2 ans dans le canton, c'est que les acteurs de la formation continue sont souvent seuls dans leur champ d'expérience et champ d'expertise. Il y a 2 semaines en arrière, nous avons créé une association des acteurs de la formation continue en Valais. Et pour notre petit territoire, je peux vous assurer que c'était un grand succès. Lors de la soirée aussi d'inauguration de cette association, nous nous sommes retrouvés à peu près 80 acteurs de la formation continue valaisans. Alors, bien entendu, ça ne touche pas que le tertiaire, ça touche des acteurs qui sont aussi dans une dimension extrêmement noble de formation continue sur des compétences de base. Des challenges aussi qu'on a dans notre société, un challenge parallèle à la problématique et aux enjeux des droits de l'enfant, c'est aussi accompagner toute une partie de la population. En Valais, c'est 1 personne sur 6 qui a des problèmes de lecture. Donc, pouvoir aussi accompagner des personnes qui sont défavorisées. Donc, dans le cadre de cette association, on a créé un réseau des acteurs de la formation continue, partant des acteurs totalement non universitaires jusqu'aux acteurs universitaires. Et le but, c'est de pouvoir développer aussi toute une série de dynamiques avec ces différents acteurs pour répondre aux défis de la société. Donc, en conclusion, je ne peux que me réjouir de la création de cette académie. Le rôle que le CID, le rôle que l'Université de Genève veut jouer dans le fait de vouloir relever les défis de l'éducation et de la formation tout au long de la vie dans le champ des droits de l'enfant. Je suis persuadé aussi que cette initiative va permettre de renforcer ces connaissances et ces collaborations qui sont extrêmement importantes entre les professionnels, qu'ils soient sur notre site à Bramois, mais surtout dans une dynamique nationale et internationale. La mission des droits de l'enfant est une mission fondamentale, ça a été rappelé également tout à l'heure par M. Hanson, et j'espère que cette nouvelle académie va pouvoir, au travers de ses activités, faire rayonner et aborder l'ensemble des défis de la formation et l'éducation tout au long de la vie sur le champ des droits de l'enfant. Je vous remercie pour votre attention et je vous souhaite vraiment un excellent séminaire, d'excellents partages cet après-midi, mais surtout un avenir extrêmement radieux pour la Children's Rights Academy.
Merci, Monsieur Ray, pour l'aperçu sur la stratégie du canton en matière de formation continue, mais aussi pour la mise, comment dire, en évidence du rôle que la Children's Rights Academy peut jouer ou pourra jouer pour la suite dans ce contexte. Mais merci également et surtout, je dirais, pour les paroles d'encouragement pour la suite. Merci beaucoup. On termine ici notre the opening, the welcoming. Et je passe la parole à mon collègue Simon Hammond pour la deuxième partie.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Simon Neme. I'm associate to the directorship of the Children's Rights Academy. And I'm delighted to welcome you for the thematic discussion session for this lunch event. I want to apologize for those who are online. We don't have interpretation for this event. So there is no interpretation. There will be sessions that are exclusively in English and others exclusively in French. Donc, bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Simon, je suis associé à la direction de la Children's Rights Academy. Je m'excuse pour ceux qui sont en ligne, il y aura des séances qui sont en anglais, d'autres en français. Il n'y a pas de traduction pour cet événement. We aim with our speakers to explore a pivotal question in the realm of children human rights and continuous education. This question is, how can interdisciplinarity and intersectorality in children's rights studies advance the protection and promotion of children's rights? So in an era where the importance of children's rights cannot be overstated, this webinar represents a unique opportunity to deepen our understanding and commitment to this vital cause by looking into three main areas. The first we will start with will be the synergies and collaboration opportunities for continuous education in human rights and particularly in children's rights. The second will explore the importance of a thematic focus when it comes to continuous education. And in our session, we will look particularly at children forced migration and displacement. And the final one will explore the importance of skill-focused continuous education by looking particularly at the practice of mediation, particularly in the context of family and school environment for our session. So for our first part, for the first session, the central question we will explore is, what other avenues should adult education explore in the context regarding the thematic content of the training programs? So we will delve upon the pedagogical formats that are best suited to effectively reach and engage professionals, particularly those working with children and for children. Our first speaker, Roberta Ruggiero, holds the prestigious position of Director of the Children's Rights Academy. Roberta has been a driving force in children-related advocacy and informed advocacy. She has extensive experience in the field of the monitoring of children's rights as a basis for informed policy development in this field. She will shed the light on the multifaceted dimension of children's rights, emphasizing the critical role of interdisciplinarity and intersectoral studies. Joining her online is our second speaker, Gloria Gaggioli, who serves as the director of the Geneva Academy and is an esteemed associate professor at the law faculty of the University of Geneva. With her extensive expertise in international law and human rights, we will delve into the evolving landscape of human rights protection, particularly in the context of armed conflicts and international human rights law. So I welcome both our speakers for our first session. Roberta, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Simon, for the introduction. I think I have to, okay. No, I'll try not, but I have to admit that it's scaring thing when you open up a PowerPoint and it's not your PowerPoint. So Thanks, Simon. I was saying for the introduction, we start here this thematic discussion, and I'm particularly happy because I think rather than keeping talking about unveiling, we could start by revealing the component further of the Children's Rights Academy. What I will do so is to start immediately with the mission of the CRA. Of course, it was created by bringing together, as first intention, I would say, bringing together the continuing education programs and activities of the Center for Children's Rights Studies of the University of Geneva. The intention was not only, of course, to preserve them, but mainly was to strengthen them and to innovate them and to develop and roll out the strategy on continuing education of what we called in French the CIDE. How to do it? By advancing the critical reflection, empirical knowledge, and intellectual curiosity, which is a component that was mentioned also before, among children's rights professionals, offering continuing education programs that are firmly or strongly connected to the interdisciplinary field of children's rights studies, and that are firmly connected or linked with the activities of national and international academic and professional networks. The intention is the following, is providing programs that are supported by local and global research, interdisciplinary research and outreach activities that are constantly developed with the idea of joining theory and practice. Those are also two words that comes and will come back again in our discussion. By applying with strong conviction a learner-centered approach, which has a lot to do not just with the content of our program, but also with the format of our program, including, of course, in its in-presence, distance, and hybrid blended components. Of course, the centrality of the learned leads us automatically to make an assessment on the learning needs. But we don't concentrate exclusively on, I would say, the learning needs of individual professional. The discussion and the elements to keep into consideration are the learning needs of the sector to a larger scale. Developing skills and knowledge of professionals working in the children's rights field is a recurrent component. While we talk directly with professionals, for example, they constantly ask, they frequently go back to the necessity to learn more about, here I wrote core concepts and norms, the normative frameworks that describes, present, outline, that states the children's rights. But they also ask for further knowledge in relation to the referral framework, so the actors that are working in the children's rights field and their experience, their practice. Last but not least, those professionals constantly ask to enlarge their knowledge, to strengthen their knowledge about the recent developments and the empirical findings emerging, coming out as outcomes of a research scientific activity. And international stakeholders that is particularly important in the field of children's rights studies is the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. These actors, in essentially all the concluding observations that are issued to each one of the states party that ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, recommend constantly to strengthen the knowledge of professionals in the children's rights field. Switzerland is not an exception. It's one of the cases I thought could have been interesting to have a look at together today. The committee, to the last fifth and sixth reports submitted by Switzerland on the condition of children within the national reality, is recommending Switzerland to I don't know why he does it on his own. Is recommending Switzerland to develop comprehensive education teaching activities on children's rights for the professionals that are working in those 8 sectors. With a specific focus, but not an exclusive one. So with education, in the sector of education, in the sector of health, child protection, social protection, alternative care, justice, asylum, and migration. But the position of, I would say, the learning needs are a key component. However, at the Children's Rights Academy, as others started to outline it before me, we strongly believe in the societal impact of continuing education. Continuing education at the CRA is perceived as a tool and as a vehicle to find solutions to complex society-related issues, but also to an ever-changing societies. And the field of children's rights studies is not an exception. The societal impact of continuing education become visible when we concentrate ourselves on what I called here the micro level and the macro one. At the micro level, Monsieur Ray was mentioning the lifelong learning mindset. At this level, at the micro level, we aim to promote professional advancement, but also to enhance the agility and interdisciplinary skills to address complex and multi-level complex issues in society. To reinforce, of course, one's professional self-worth. At the macro level, though, when we talk about the societal impact of continuing education, we refer to the process of bridging between academia and practice and policy. Carl was referring to that before with the metaphor of the bridges. But we also bolsters expertise in the children's rights sectors and support societal ability to embrace children's rights. So we move beyond, if the first, at the macro level, we work on personal growth, the last and ultimate societal goal of the continuing education is to enrich society. Therefore, to accomplish the societal value of continuing education, the program of the CRA are developed, I would say, I like the word crafted, with a thorough understanding of these 4 fields. A thorough understanding of the academic, interdisciplinary research and outreach field, a thorough understanding of the practice and policy buy-in, a thorough understanding of the learner centrality and of the stakeholders in working within and outside academia. Operating in the field of the stakeholders operating within and outside academia, that all together, and this is what I was referring to before, they all together from an intersectoral professional dynamic and contribute to the crafting of our program and contribute to the effectiveness of our continuing education endeavors. All the programs of the CRA are developed based on this thorough understanding, and today, I'm not going to present them in detail, but today they are organized on these 4 categories. I'll give you, though, 2 examples of 2 programs, 2 new programs that can give you an understanding on what it means to have such an approach and what are the outcomes of that process. The 2 programs are, the first one is a DAS, is a diploma, Défi en protection de l'enfance, politique, droit et capacité. It's a joint training that is offered by the CIDE together with the School of Applied Science on Social Work of the French-speaking part of Switzerland. So Freiburg, Geneva, Valais, and Vaud. The program will start hopefully in November this year and will run until September 2024. The working language, as you can see here, is French. The second one is an executive training. It's a short training program on civil aspect on the international child protection that is offered, is a joint training that is offered by the CIDE and the Department of International Private Law of the Faculty of Law of the University of Geneva. The working language here is English, and the program should start in December this year and will run until April 2004. Here you have two examples of training programs, both focused on child protection-related issues and meant to address different learning needs in this field, both at the national and international level, using different pedagogical formats and tools to better fit, I would say, the characteristic of the target population, the addresses of these two, the professionals that are, I would say, at the receiving end of this training. I pass over to my colleague, Gloria Gaggioli, and that will contribute to other component of our discussion today. Thanks, Gloria, for being with us.
Thank you very much, Roberta, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very honored to take part in the launch of the Children's Rights Academy, albeit at a distance. And I would like to warmly thank my colleague, Professor Carl Hansen, for his invitation. Most importantly, I wish to congratulate Professor Carl Hansen and Dr. Roberta Ruggiero and their teams for having created and for launching the Children's Rights Academy, which is a wonderful initiative bringing together the continuing education programs and activities of the University of Geneva Center for Children's Rights Studies. You have chosen a catchy name, a name that we now share as we are also an academy. So I'm representing the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights, which was created 15 years ago as a joint center of the University of Geneva and the Geneva Graduate Institute. So not only you chose a catchy name, but when I looked at the offer of the CRA, I was truly impressed by the richness and diversity of training programs you offer. The number of persons you train on a yearly basis is impressive as well. As mentioned by our Vice Rector, Micheline Louise Courvoisier, you train every year more than 10,000 participants. That's admirable. What an impact you can have with that. Moreover, the importance of the theme of children's rights cannot be overestimated, as Simon said as well. Children are amongst the most vulnerable members of our society, and they deserve a special protection. This is true in peacetime, but also in times of armed conflicts. Investing in children's rights means also investing in our future. It means building just societies where children can see their human dignity protected, whatever the circumstances. It means also breaking the cycles of poverty or violence. I'm thinking about, for instance, the reintegration of child soldiers in countries affected by armed conflicts. As an international lawyer, I wish to stress that upholding children's rights is not only a moral imperative, but a legal obligation. Please let me recall that the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is the most ratified human rights convention around the world, even before the 1949 Geneva Conventions that regulate armed conflicts and that are so close to our heart at the Geneva Academy. Lastly, I truly believe in the empowerment and the participation of children. I think this is one of the solutions to the greater challenges we will have to face on the global scale, be it in relation to climate change and the protection of the environment, the technological developments and artificial intelligence, or the promotion of democracy, because democracy is a political system that relies on young generations that are able and willing to vote. By the way, one of the many events that we organized at the Academy this year, and that was a true highlight, was one of our human rights conversations that was hosted by our dynamic Geneva Human Rights Platform on child participation in the work of UN human rights mechanisms. So it was held in February in our beautiful Villa Moignet, and it was so admirable to see that the Villa Moignet was filled with children. And we heard an inspiring panel with 2 children youth representatives. And I have to say that this gave me hope for the future. This is all to say that I fully concur with the analysis of Carl and Roberta that there is a need to develop knowledge on children's rights, and I would say, from a Geneva Academy perspective, on human rights and its counterpart in armed conflicts, international humanitarian law. So our mission at the Geneva Academy is to enhance the legal protection of all individuals in peacetime and wartime, and we strongly believe that education is one of the best tools to reach that objective. In this domain, our parent institutions, the University of Geneva and the Graduate Institute, have a clear position of leaders worldwide, because Geneva is the city of humanitarian law and human rights par excellence. Not only there is a massive interest in these areas and need to transfer and create knowledge in the domain of human rights and humanitarian law, but we in Geneva are the best placed to do so. We have the luxury of being surrounded by an ecosystem of international organizations, NGOs, and professionals who can both contribute and be in demand of more informed knowledge on these domains. This brings me to the point of the importance of continuing education and of the concept of lifelong training. We live in a rapidly changing world confronted with numerous new and complex challenges that simply did not exist when professionals studied 20 or 10 years ago. In my field, it is apparent that international legal frameworks evolve continuously. Look, for instance, at the jurisprudence in international human rights law. So continuing education ensures that human rights practitioners, lawyers, and policymakers are well informed and can effectively use the law in their work. The complexity of the issues we deal with require also often an interdisciplinary perspective that professionals are eager to explore. Second, careers are less linear than in the past, and employees need to develop their skills and expertise on a continuous basis to stay attractive on the job market. Beyond career, in a search for personal growth, numerous professionals have the strong desire to acquire new knowledge and an intellectual curiosity that we have to salute. Lastly, continuing education provides opportunities to grow your network. Through the direct interactions with the academics, experts, practitioners, and even amongst participants, there are possibilities for future collaborations that emerge and synergies that appear. It is thus clear that the strategy of the University of Geneva to invest in continuing education and to develop the concept of lifelong training, to which both the Children's Rights Academy and the Geneva Academy participate, is essential in our world and promises to have a great societal impact. This strategy has in turn great advantages for the University of Geneva, as it allows partnering with key players on a national and international basis, and that is essential for the internationalization of the University of Geneva. This also allows us to bridge, and I love the metaphor that Carl was making, the bridge. This is so important, bridging academia and practice and policy. As a former legal advisor of the International Committee of the Red Cross, I can attest to the need for building and maintaining such bridges. Academia must stay attuned to the humanitarian needs in the field to develop research and training programs that are not only intellectually interesting and challenging, but also practically important to change the lives on the ground. At the same time, practitioners and policymakers must keep abreast of innovations, evolutions, and look for the incredible brain power that universities can offer. Now, I would like to turn to the question of the thematic content and pedagogical formats of our programs at the Academy. And here I have to say that, in my view, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Everything will depend in continuing education on your specific objectives, the audience you have in mind, and their needs. At the Academy, for instance, we have organized our education offer around 3 Masters of Advanced Studies that were created one after the other by my predecessors. First, we have the LLM in International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. It is one of the landmark programs of the Geneva Academy. And it is a 1-year postgraduate degree that focuses on the rules applicable to armed conflicts and their interaction. So this LLM program is taught in person. It was created more than 15 years ago, actually, because already the predecessor of the academy, the University Center for International Humanitarian Law, had this program. And this program acquired a global reputation. So we have an audience made of young professionals, mainly lawyers, who wish to work in the humanitarian domain and sector. We have a huge attractivity with this program. More than 400 students apply every year to take part in this program, and we select 40. So you can imagine the selective process we enjoy with this program. The second master MIS we have is the Master on Transitional Justice. Here we focus on post-conflict and peace building. It is also a one-year postgraduate degree, also taught in person. Here it's an interdisciplinary program. So I see here the links also with the CRA. We deal with young professionals coming from very different backgrounds. Some are sociologists, psychologists, lawyers, political scientists, and so forth and so on. So we have a beautiful and great diversity, not only regarding themes, but also in terms of geography. The last program that we have is the Executive Master in International Law in Armed Conflicts. And this one is a part-time online program that designed for high-level professionals who really want to gain a thorough understanding and knowledge of international law that applies in armed conflicts. So here the audience that we have is made of diplomats, ICSC delegates, heads of delegations, practitioners from MSF, Geneva Call, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, numerous NGOs, and so forth and so on. So this is a quite demanding program. At the end, the participants have a master. They can even do a PhD if they have a background in law. But we noticed that it was very suitable for a number of participants, but we had also practitioners who wanted to take just some of the modules that we created in the Executive Master Program. So a few years ago, 3 years ago, we created short courses, which allow also policymakers and practitioners to just attend and take part in some of the modules that we offer in the Executive Master. So this allows us an agility and flexibility, and allows us also to touch a broader audience. Additionally, we have developed a training hub as part of the Geneva Human Rights Platform. So the Geneva Human Rights Platform is part and parcel of the Geneva Academy. If you want, the Geneva Academy is made of 3 pillars. One of the pillars is education with the master's programs I just presented. Then we have the pillar on research. And the third pillar that is made by the platform, the Geneva Human Rights Platform, which has the objective of connecting all the UN human rights bodies and more broadly international human rights bodies together, linking up experts in this area in order to increase the efficiency of those human rights bodies. So through the Geneva Human Rights Platform, we have developed a training hub. And the training hub offers practical training courses on the work and functioning of UN human rights mechanisms. And it intends at serving as a central hub and federating structure for human rights training courses on the mechanisms in Geneva. So we do offer several courses of around 1 week, for instance, on the Universal Periodic Review of the Human Rights Council, on the monitoring and implementation strategies at the national level of human rights recommendations. We have a training on business and human rights, and so forth and so on. Additionally, we do offer customized trainings like the CRA, like the Children's Rights Academy. We can develop trainings based on the needs of the organizations or bodies that contact us. So for instance, we have developed a training with the Norwegian Center for Human Rights on UN human rights mechanisms. We also do customized trainings in the field of international humanitarian law and international criminal law. Last year, for instance, a court in The Hague asked us to come there and to develop a training of 1 week on IHL humanitarian law applying in non-international armed conflicts and related international criminal law issues. This year, we want to develop a training for judges and prosecutors in Ukraine. So this is just to give you an example of the variety of trainings that we can develop in addition to the master's programs that we have. To close, I would like to make a few give you a few lessons learned and challenges ahead that I have identified. So for the lessons learned, I think there is a big importance in diversifying the offer that we have. So we are very content with our master's program, but we saw how much the short courses were really attractive for a number of practitioners. We want potentially to develop master classes in the same mindset. And we see also that the trainings offered by the training hubs are very famous now and attract many persons to the Geneva Academy. Another lesson learned is the importance to have a mix between academics and practitioners, with a strong involvement also of the in-house faculty, especially for the master's programs, to ensure that there is a continuity. So the good mix between academics and practitioners, policymakers, also makes the success of the training programs and the masters that we offer. Third, I think there is a very important need to inform teaching by research. And at the Academy, we make huge efforts to break the silos between the different pillars and to have synergies between the research and education by bringing in also researchers from the platform in the education programs. Then I think that innovating in programs on a regular basis is absolutely essential. We found that changing optional courses on a very regular basis around every 2 years for our master's programs was a success. And lastly, as a lesson learned, I think that it's very important to focus not only on knowledge, but on skills. So for instance, we do offer the possibility for our students to take part in the Jean Pictet competition, which is a competition in international humanitarian law where they can really take the law out of the books. And this is an incredible experience for our students. Another example, we created an optional course on humanitarian skills last year. And it has a huge success. Students just loved it. You know, they become experts in humanitarian law, but they want to know, okay, what am I going to do or to say if I'm at the checkpoint in the field? How am I going to use the knowledge that I acquired at the Academy? So this had a great success. Now the challenges ahead. I think here we have also to stress the importance of diversity and inclusion in the selection of our faculty, of the members of our governing bodies, but also in the selection of our students. And in relation to this, I have to stress the need to have sufficient scholarships. And while we have, for instance, at the Academy, been able to raise 29 scholarships for the LLM and the MTJ, the two first programs I mentioned, it is very difficult to obtain scholarships for the executive master program for practitioners, because donors say, well, they are already, experienced diplomats, policymakers. Do they really need a scholarship? And my answer is actually yes, they do, because depending on where you come from, it's not the same to take part in a program like this. And so here it's a challenge to find a way to finance also the participation of persons from all backgrounds and from all countries. A second challenge I see is about rethinking evaluation. Now with the development of ChatGPT and other artificial intelligence software, we have to rethink how we are going to evaluate the performance of our students and participants in our programs. The last challenge is about making sense despite the noise. So making sure that we have an offer that is very clear, explaining the added value of each program, explaining the differences between the different programs that we offer and the different trainings that we offer. So here the strategy also for our parent institutions is very important, because we have to think about where we want to invest and why, and how we can create synergies between different centers and programs, and how we can align then the different strategies around a common goal. So to conclude, we have a number of challenges, but also great opportunities. And I clearly welcome synergies with the Children's Rights Academy. We did have the opportunity to collaborate already this year on the screening of the documentary I Am Chance at the Villa Monnier. And I thank again Carl for this opportunity, and I hope there will be many more. Thank you very much for your attention.
to have Professor Hartz, Professor Jason Hartz with us. He's a renowned professor of humanitarianism and development at the University of Bath and a visiting lecturer at the Center for Children's Rights Studies at the University of Geneva. Professor Hartz has an extensive academic background in the field of marginalized youth and have provided invaluable insight into the complex issues of children forced migration and displacement. He will mainly focus on two questions: what other avenues could adult education explore in this specific context, and what kind of training would be most beneficial for the Children's Rights Academy to develop and for whom. Additionally, we are fortunate also to have one of our alumni, Mrs. Sitnur Babiker. Sitnur is a child protection specialist working currently for UNHCR in Geneva. And as an alumnus of the program, she will provide us with valuable insight into the impact that this program has had on her career and work. Specifically, she will share how the knowledge gained from this program has influenced her work at UNHCR. So welcome, Jason, welcome, Sitnur. Jason, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Can everyone hear me all right? I hope so. Good. I can see someone nodding. Great. Thank you so much. Many congratulations on the launch of the Child Rights Academy. I'm excited and honored to participate in the launch of this important new initiative, and I send my very best wishes to my good friends, Carl, Roberta, and Simon, and many congratulations. So as Simon mentioned, I've been invited today to offer reflections about the emerging challenges for displaced children, and in addition, to consider the knowledge and perspective needed by professionals tasked with addressing those challenges. So in response, I wanted to speak about three elements of an approach to teaching and training that I believe we need to strengthen at this time. And those three elements are, firstly, interdisciplinarity, secondly, intersectionality, and thirdly, the relationship between norms and practice. So I'll take each one in turn, starting with interdisciplinarity, which I note is the theme of one of the themes of today's meeting, and suggesting that we need to promote an explicit interdisciplinary approach in consideration of the challenges and interventions when working with displaced children. In other words, we need to empower professionals to understand a theme or issue from multiple and interrelated perspectives. So I stress the interrelated. We're not talking just about multidisciplinarity, we're talking about interdisciplinarity. And those perspectives may at times harmonize well with each other, at times they may be opposed to one another, or certainly opposed at initial viewing. So for example, we might look at psychosocial interventions with displaced children from the perspectives of psychology and social work, as is currently commonplace, but add to this a perspective from anthropology, focusing on what kind of intervention is appropriate to the social and cultural context. And we could add further to this the invitation from political science to consider the politics of focusing on displaced children as traumatized victims, employing the critical notion of therapeutic governance. So in other words, to consider the political implications of characterizing displaced children as victims that need rescuing, rather than as social actors whose views should be attended to in full, including aspects of their experience or aspects of their views that may be difficult or unpalatable for humanitarians to hear, to attend to. So to achieve an interdisciplinary understanding, we should support students to both synthesize different disciplinary approaches and to identify the discontinuities between the approaches presented by different lecturers. In terms of research, many funders are increasingly calling for projects that bring together and integrate diverse disciplinary perspectives, and I believe that our teaching should be seeking to do the same as much as possible. The second development of our approach that I think is needed is greater attention to intersectionality. And it's long been the case that we ask consistently about the differential impacts of displacement upon boys and girls. There has been some effort to address the experiences and needs of disabled children in displacement settings, and some attention has been paid to age in chronological and relational terms. That is to say, the differences in needs between younger and older children and between firstborn and youngest child in the same household. What's largely missing, however, is serious attention to the impact of the combination of factors of gender, age, class, disability, sexual orientation, race and ethnicity, and so on. In my experience of teaching, it often takes a while for students to move from looking at each of these factors in isolation from each other to looking at them in an integrated manner. Yet it is evident that in settings of displacement, the needs and experiences of, say, a 17-year-old ethnic minority boy from a poor rural background and a 10-year-old girl with mobility issues from a well-educated urban background will differ considerably. Those working with displaced children need to develop the conceptual understanding and the methodology to pursue an intersectional approach. And that is something that I think a good sound training should endeavour to offer them. Finally, I wanted to suggest that there is a growing need to attend to the relationship between, on one hand, norms, and on the other, practices on the ground as these relate to displaced children. In terms of norms regarding displaced children, we draw upon the CRC, International Humanitarian Law, the 1951 Refugee Convention, and the principles of humanitarian action as laid out in the 1994 Code of Conduct. However, there is often a large disconnect between such norms and the actions of humanitarian organizations, donors, and host governments. This disconnect is often excused by reference to the need for pragmatism in practice. And it's certainly important to look at the challenges on the ground and how a pragmatic approach might be needed. However, I fear that principle is at risk of being abandoned too quickly and without question. One example is the abandonment of the principle of universality in the response to displaced children. I've seen the consequence of this in my own work with refugee children in Jordan, where, depending on nationality, a child may be able to receive considerable support to meet their basic needs, or may be ignored entirely in the provision of aid if they are of the wrong nationality. We need to equip those involved at the front line of humanitarian action to fight for the realization of principle, even as they work within the current status quo. And with that, I conclude my comments. Thank you very much.
I'm very good afternoon, colleagues. And I'm Sidnur Babikir, as Simon mentioned. I'm a child protection officer with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, UNHCR, based here in Geneva. I'm very privileged and honored to be among you today. I'm also very lucky to speak now because everything I wanted to say already well covered. So I'm just going to quickly speak from the practitioner's point of view, as we kind of assume ourselves as the end user or the target of the continuing education. What we have to face on a daily basis, this is very important for us. We like numbers, although they are painful, but because they kind of explain what a child protection or a health or a nutrition officer has to face on a daily basis on the ground. So as we speak, well, as of the end of 2022, we reach, unfortunately, around 108 million forcibly displaced persons around worldwide. And you can see the reasons. Among them is human rights violation, persecution and conflict and generalized violence. So when we speak about children's rights, it's indeed one of the key triggers or drivers for displacement. This among either being displaced within their home country, so they are internally displaced, or had to cross international borders and seek asylum in neighboring countries. Among the forcibly displaced persons, around 40% are children. However, in some regions, this goes up to 60%. And you can see the demographic in terms of age and gender. 52% originated from 3 countries. Unfortunately, Syria remains at the top, Ukraine and Afghanistan. And 67% of refugees are hosted in low and middle income countries. And this is very important. When we speak about professionals and systems, the impact on existing services is massive with the numbers we are seeing. They are hosted, Turkey come on the top of countries, 3.6 million, and you can see the list. And also you can kind of understand the situation in each of these countries that is really also challenging for its own children. In terms of people displaced within their country, this is kind of just a quick comparison between 2021 and 2022. And you can see the increase in number of people who are displaced and forced to leave their home, but remained within their own country. So this is just a quick recap of what I'm facing and my colleagues on the ground as a practitioner. And always the challenge is, then how am I going to keep myself up to date with academic, learning, knowledge, etc., if from day to day I have to face this? When the influx of refugees or even internally displaced persons happen, it happens overnight. We can't predict the numbers. And if we give an example of Ukraine, within few days or weeks, it reached 100,000. It's beyond systems capacity, it's beyond agencies and organizations' capacity. Then that means that we have to expand our workforce in a way that then how it matches when it comes to learning and development. So the challenge always for us is the time and the speed. And I just want to connect with the previous intervention in terms of to what extent we can make our learning agile and ready and on the job. So would I be able to spend how many hours? So one of the challenges I'm facing as a practitioner is about to what extent I can match this. I can reserve some time to learn, keep myself up to date. Now I will come to my experience as, I think now it's over a decade, among the first generation of the master's studies in children's rights. At the time, I was a national staff with UNICEF in my own country, in West Darfur. And this for me was an eye-catching master's degree, children's rights. Okay, I have been training on it, reading about it, but never perceived a kind of academic learning on children's rights. So I joined 2010, 2011. So I will not tell my age, but that's where I am. And I remember very well one of the immediate impact. We had a course, a module on child labor. And I went back to my office, and there was a huge discussion about child labor. One thing I took immediately from that module and the discussion we had during the course is the debate. For me, child labor always mostly linked to economical issues or challenges. But then there is the social norms, the interdisciplinarity, intersectionality. That's never occurred to me because it's like child labor, I have to stop children from working. It's about livelihood. I think the approach at least I benefited from, was the debate between, at the time we had a colleague from ILO and a colleague from, if I remember well, Child Work Alliance, if I remember the name correctly. And that for me was an eye-opener because someone speaks exactly how I think, no for child labor, it's an economic issue, and someone else, no, you need to consider X and Y and Z. And when I went back and I said I said, you know what, let's pause here and let's discuss about the reasons and the causes. So for me, academic studies has really to speak to my day-to-day challenge. And this is about my experience and the impact on my work. And then I moved from UNICEF, worked with refugees, how to apply best interest of the child principle, making sure that every decision we are making is in the best interest of the children. So it's not just a theory, it's also in practice. So what I wanted to share with you, really nothing structured, but my own experience and reflection of how academic study can really speak to the practice if it's designed well. And I'm very pleased to hear how the Children's Rights Academy is really based and built around speaking to the practice and bridging the gap. I concurred the UN colleague who shared that it's important really to bridge the gap because it's challenging for what we call ourselves practitioners when we do human rights. The other maybe challenge that need to be addressed that children's rights kind of assume to be one sector responsibility. When we speak about humanitarian sector, we operate differently from national system. So when you say children's rights, oh, this is child protection, rather than no, children's rights is everyone's responsibility. And hence, I would always ask to what extent a health officer or a water and sanitation officer will find it interesting to join a master's degree or a diploma or on children's rights. So we don't have the usual suspect, people who work in either child protection or social protection, but it also appeals to others who definitely has to be part of it and has to join hands to promote children's rights, especially in displacement. I will stop here. This is just personal reflection. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So, moving from the current development in the field and identifying the training need that professionals working on forced migration and displacement issue require today, we will now together aim to foster dialogue and contribute to improve practices in supporting practitioners with skills. And here we will focus on the skill of mediation. I will invite the three speakers who I have the pleasure to introduce today. I have with me here Christian, who will lead our discussion by delving into the evolution of mediation in family conflict and mediation, particularly in the school environment, in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. He will also particularly speak about the experience of the Valais. Following Christian's insight, we have Zoe Moody, who will focus on the critical theme of bullying in the school context. She will explore the specific learning needs of educational teams in addressing this issue, highlighting how mediation can effectively tackle and mitigate the challenges children face. Zoe will also discuss the creation of the Certificate of Advanced Studies in School Bullying and its motivation and the avenues that adult education should explore in this context. And finally, we will hear from Siglia, an alumni of the program of the CAS in mediation particularly. She will share her personal journey of training and discuss the impact of this CAS on her career as well. She will also look into the broader field of mediation and will provide valuable insight into the development of mediation today in the training need of professional mediators. Christian, the floor is yours.
Mesdames et messieurs, chers collègues, volontiers, je vais m'entretenir. On a peu de temps dans nos présentations. On va essayer d'être synthétique. C'est vrai que peut-être en introduction à ma présentation, je crois que l'interdisciplinarité, elle doit aussi se vivre de manière structurelle. Et c'est vrai qu'on a eu la chance en Valais d'adopter en 2000 une loi en faveur de la jeunesse qui a rassemblé en fait l'ensemble des professionnels qui travaillent avec des enfants en difficulté au sein d'un même service, avec un département promotion, la protection, la psychologie scolaire, la logopédie pour tout ce qui est du trouble langagier, et puis la psychomote, plus différents, tout ce qui est secteur de la petite enfance, etc., ont été regroupés sous un même toit. Et je pense que ça c'est aussi par ces éléments structurels qu'on peut forcer, entre guillemets, l'interdisciplinarité, avec le risque sinon de travailler toujours en silo. Et c'est vrai qu'alors, j'ai beaucoup aimé l'image des géants et de la tour. C'est vrai qu'on a eu la chance de côtoyer un de ces géants, Jean Zermatten, et son impact, c'est vrai, sur le développement de la politique de l'enfance et de la jeunesse en Valais est certain. On va parler notamment de ce projet pilote du consensus parental actuellement sur les districts de Monté, Martigny, Saint-Maurice et Entremont. Et c'est vrai que, si vous voulez, le départ de cette réflexion, c'est un séminaire qui avait été organisé à l'époque avec le CID, la HEP, la HESSO du canton du Valais et notre service, qui traitait des nouvelles formes de parentalité, le temps du partage. On est en 2016. Et puis, suite à ce séminaire, effectivement, on a l'Observatoire cantonal de la jeunesse du canton du Valais qui s'est saisi de cette thématique, qui a mené une réflexion avec des recommandations faites au gouvernement valaisan en disant il faut qu'on réfléchisse à faire différemment lorsque des parents se séparent. Il faut mieux accompagner ce moment fragile de la séparation. Et de là est né effectivement ce projet pilote. Donc vous voyez que là, l'importance de la recherche, d'amener une réflexion, d'une réflexion aussi pluridisciplinaire pour arriver en finalité sur un projet concret qui est ce pilote consensus. Là, j'ai mis toutes les slides, il y en a une trentaine, donc je vous ferai grâce, je ne vais pas passer toutes les slides dans la présentation. Mais c'est vrai que ici, ce qui est importé pour nous, c'était de remettre l'enfant au centre du débat. C'est-à-dire que lors d'une séparation, c'est un moment de fragilité pour les parents, mais aussi un moment de fragilité pour l'enfant. Clairement, pour nous, l'enfant est la partie faible dans cette situation. Et comment mieux accompagner en fait les parents en les rappelant au fait que l'enfant est vraiment le centre d'intérêt de tout ce processus, et puis d'accompagner au mieux l'enfant pour qu'il ne soit pas détruit par le conflit parental qui peut vraiment être dévastateur pour l'enfant sur des années, sur son développement. Donc vraiment, là, les principes, c'est convaincre les parents en situation de séparation qu'ils ont une responsabilité commune par rapport à leur enfant, une obligation faite aux parents aussi de se rencontrer, de communiquer, de trouver un accord satisfaisant. Et puis, alors, ce qui est aussi un petit peu la magie de ce modèle de consensus, c'est ce travail interdisciplinaire entre les différents acteurs qui participent à la procédure afin de véhiculer un message commun. Donc, nous avons les juges, les autorités de protection de l'enfant et de l'adulte, les avocats, les médiateurs, médiatrices, les intervenants psychosociaux qui vont tous travailler dans cette même objectif qui est de protéger l'enfant et surtout d'amener les parents à cette coparentalité. On voit aujourd'hui en Suisse, il y a eu plusieurs évolutions avec notamment l'autorité parentale conjointe qui est aujourd'hui la règle. On va peut-être dans quelques années être sur une garde alternée qui sera aussi la règle. Mais voilà, après, on doit arriver à faire cheminer ces parents qui se séparent pour entrer dans une vraie coparentalité. Et l'ensemble de ces acteurs ici sont importants pour y réussir. Je vais peut-être vous présenter juste les mesures effectivement que l'on a mis en place. Un petit tableau synoptique qui résume un petit peu les différentes choses. Alors, un des premiers outils, c'est vrai qu'on a fait une brochure qui permet aussi de sensibiliser les parents, qu'on va distribuer effectivement dans toutes les séances. Donc, tous les parents, avant de démarrer en fait concrètement la procédure devant les tribunaux, ils sont invités à une séance de sensibilisation qui dure 1h30, où là, on présente effectivement les principes du processus de Cochem, avec les pièges à éviter, avec vraiment des mises en garde vis-à-vis des parents en disant attention, dans certaines situations, vous allez vraiment pouvoir faire du mal à votre enfant, et voilà les pièges à éviter. Et puis, pour les autorités, on a mis en place effectivement différents outils. Et c'est clair que la médiation, là, elle joue un rôle central parce que ça va permettre au juge qui va se retrouver dans une situation où il sent des parents en difficulté à trouver un accord sur la manière dont la vie va s'organiser après la séparation, la possibilité aujourd'hui d'envoyer ses parents en médiation. L'État prend en charge les 5 premières heures. Donc, il y a eu plus de 65 médiations depuis le début du pilote qui ont été ordonnées. Statistiquement, c'est énorme en Valais parce que c'est vrai que dans ces situations, souvent au stade de la séparation devant les tribunaux, il n'y avait quasiment jamais recours à la médiation. Donc aujourd'hui, la médiation va permettre effectivement à ces parents de prendre un peu de recul dans un milieu neutre. Ça va leur permettre de revenir devant le juge avec une solution partielle ou totale. On a à peu près 80% de taux d'accord partiels ou totaux dans les médiations qui sont ordonnées par le juge. C'est une exhortation à y aller, mais je dirais tous les parents saisissent cette opportunité. Ce qui est intéressant aussi, c'est qu'une grande partie de ces médiations continue au-delà des 5 premières séances qui sont remboursées par l'État, parce que les parents voient bien le bénéfice à aller dans ce processus et ils sont prêts à ce moment-là à payer peut-être encore 1 ou 2, 3, 4 séances pour arriver à une solution. Et je pense que là, on voit bien que c'est un des instruments importants, mais sans, je dirais, le travail pluridisciplinaire qui est fait par l'ensemble des acteurs, je ne pense pas qu'on arriverait à de tels résultats. Parce que là, effectivement, tant les offices de protection de l'enfant que les médiateurs, que les acteurs qui travaillent à la coparentalité distillent vraiment toujours le même message auprès des parents. Alors, on a aussi des outils très pratiques qui ont été mis en place. Je vais peut-être passer sur l'autre point parce que sinon on va être à court de temps. C'est vrai que dans deuxième géant, je dirais que j'ai identifié dans quelque chose qui a amené un changement structurel aussi dans la méthode d'approche et la manière d'intervenir. C'est monsieur Jean-Pierre Bonafé-Schmitt qui était à l'Institut universitaire Kurt Bosch, qui est l'ancêtre un petit peu du CID en Valais, avec la médiation scolaire qui a été créée en Valais en 1985. Donc ça fait 38 ans en fait que cette médiation scolaire existe. Et là aussi, on est dans une approche pluridisciplinaire avec des enseignants qui vont se former en fait au métier de la médiation scolaire, qui vont être localisés dans les écoles. On a à peu près 200 médiateurs scolaires aujourd'hui, tant au niveau primaire qu'au niveau secondaire et au niveau de la formation professionnelle. Et ces personnes en fait vont prendre en charge des situations dans le contexte scolaire, tout en continuant à être enseignants. Ils ont des heures de décharge qui leur permettent effectivement, quand un enfant est en difficulté, de les accueillir, d'échanger avec eux. Et on a aujourd'hui, c'est vrai, plus de 4400 situations qui ont été prises en charge en 2021 et 2022, avec passablement de situations effectivement qui tournent autour des conflits, de la violence, du mobbing. Donc on voit bien que la médiation scolaire, dans le thème qui nous occupe aujourd'hui, elle est vraiment importante. Peut-être un des reproches qu'on pourrait faire à cette médiation scolaire, c'est que parfois ces médiateurs manquent de temps pour approfondir, pour accompagner ces situations. Mais là aussi, de nouveau, l'interdisciplinarité intervient. On a effectivement dans leur activité, dans leur formation, la possibilité de leur présenter l'ensemble des différents acteurs du réseau. Et ce qu'on constate aujourd'hui, c'est que dans la prise en charge des situations par la suite, ces médiateurs scolaires vont quasi systématiquement s'adresser au réseau. C'est-à-dire qu'ils ont un vaste panel, notamment le centre de développement de la thérapie de l'enfant et de l'adolescent et de l'enfant qui est hébergé dans notre service, les centres CIP, des médecins, des psychologues privés vont intervenir aussi pour soutenir ces médiateurs dans la prise en charge des situations. Et c'est un réel plus dans le travail de ces médiateurs scolaires. Donc voilà, moi je pense que je vais m'arrêter là pour laisser un peu de temps de parole à mes collègues. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Voilà, bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci infiniment pour l'invitation et la possibilité qui m'est faite aujourd'hui de venir vous parler assez brièvement de la thématique du school bullying, harcèlement entre élèves, qui est une thématique de recherche à part entière au niveau international, au niveau national également, dont la définition est établie. Je vais pas m'allonger ou être trop longue là-dessus, mais on s'entend pour savoir qu'il s'agit d'une série de violences, d'agressions qui peuvent être aussi indirectes, qui sont perpétrées de manière régulière, donc il y a une répétition lorsque ça se passe en milieu scolaire. Thank you. Lorsque ça se passe en milieu scolaire, qui est perpétré par un ou plusieurs élèves à l'attention de un ou plusieurs autres élèves. Le terme est revenu à plusieurs reprises cet après-midi. C'est une problématique, c'est une thématique de recherche qui requiert une approche interdisciplinaire. On a à la fois des dimensions psychologiques qui sont en jeu, tant par rapport aux conséquences de ce type de phénomène que à leur origine, des questions également sociologiques avec une compréhension finalement des Thank you very much. Une compréhension tant des contextes dans lesquels ces situations émergent et des liens entre ce qui se passe dans le milieu scolaire et ce qui se passe à l'extérieur, et des sciences de l'éducation pour comprendre aussi comment la question éducative peut être une réponse à ce type de problématique. Le droit, et plus spécifiquement les droits de l'enfant, parce que les données de recherche montrent de plus en plus à quel point plusieurs droits de l'enfant sont affectés lorsque ce type de situation émerge. Donc sur cette carte mondiale internationale dans les questions de la recherche, eh bien, on a un pôle de compétences en Valais, et ce pôle a été progressivement mis en place, notamment, notamment avec 2 enquêtes de prévalence qui ont eu cours dans le canton, également une vaste recherche sur les trajectoires psychosociales des enfants et des adolescents et les réponses des professionnels à ce type de problématique qui a eu cours entre 2018 et 2020, et toute une série de formations en établissement. Nous avons donc, comme le suggérait aussi Christian, des données de recherche qui sont très fortement liées au terrain dans lequel nous essayons d'apporter, pour lequel nous essayons d'apporter également des connaissances, des compétences, et sur lesquelles les professionnels, qu'il s'agisse d'enseignants, enseignantes, d'éducateurs, éducatrices, médiateurs, médiatrices ou autres, peuvent également être formés. Donc, sans ouvrir le débat autour de ce qu'est l'evidence-based knowledge, je vais là affirmer que nous sommes dans, en tout cas, une forme de connaissances, de compétences qui sont fondées sur la recherche et en mesure d'être implémentées dans un contexte que nous connaissons également. Cette connaissance de ce contexte, ce dialogue aussi avec la recherche qui se déroule sur un plan plus global, permet de mettre en évidence à quel point l'intervention systémique est nécessaire face au harcèlement entre élèves. Et les personnes qui souhaitent agir, œuvrer face, prévenir, lutter contre, eh bien, ont finalement le besoin d'avoir des connaissances à plusieurs niveaux. Et je vous montre ici les 5 piliers que l'on admet comme étant communément reconnus comme efficaces dans la lutte contre le harcèlement. C'est d'un côté le fait d'être capable d'assumer des actions de sensibilisation à l'attention de tous les acteurs d'une communauté éducative. Donc ça va inclure les parents, le personnel technique, les élèves, enfin toutes les personnes qui ont un rôle à jouer dans la communauté éducative. Mais les personnes qui veulent œuvrer sur cette problématique sont également amenés à devoir penser des activités de prévention à différents niveaux. On distingue la prévention globale, donc pour tous les élèves, plus spécifique à l'attention d'élèves plus vulnérables. Être capable aussi de se former et de former les élèves ou autres collègues comme personnes ressources, à la fois sur des connaissances et des compétences de niveau global, type psychosocial, empathique, ou alors plus spécifique, comment véritablement agir en tant que témoin d'une situation de harcèlement, quelles sont les actions qui peuvent permettre de mettre un terme à une situation de harcèlement ou en tout cas de l'enrayer en partie. Être capable d'intervenir dans la même logique, c'est pas un conflit. Ce n'est pas une problématique qui pourra être traitée avec les mêmes outils que la médiation. Donc, c'est quelque chose de plus profondément ancré, avec des dynamiques très spécifiques qui nécessitent des méthodes. Il en existe plusieurs et je les listerai tout à l'heure. Mais donc, un des enjeux pour les personnes que l'on forme dans la formation continue, c'est bien de savoir choisir quelle est la méthode la plus à même d'être efficace face à une situation de harcèlement. Être aussi capable de changer de méthode lorsque celle-ci ne fonctionne pas, parce que l'on sait aussi qu'il faut parfois faire quelques essais avant de trouver la bonne manière d'intervenir. Et finalement, le dernier pilier, la question d'évaluation. Un des enjeux cruciaux, c'est de savoir déterminer assez clairement si les mesures mises en place, qu'il s'agisse de la prévention, qu'il s'agisse d'intervention, ont un effet. Et donc, comme vous le savez sans doute, la plupart de ces milieux éducatifs n'ayant pas toujours les moyens de se payer des évaluations externes, un des enjeux est de pouvoir former les professionnels à être capables d'évaluer eux-mêmes l'effet de leurs actions. Nous avons donc identifié les besoins suivants en matière de formation qui se déclinent selon un modèle assez classique finalement d'action contre les violences. D'un premier, et ce sont donc les besoins qui ont permis d'établir les objectifs du CAS, d'études interdisciplinaires sur le harcèlement scolaire. Donc le premier objectif lié à une compréhension globale du phénomène, ainsi que les conditions exacerbant son apparition. Également, être capable d'identifier les fonctions adaptatives. Donc, comme dans tout système, les individus s'adaptent à un fonctionnement d'un groupe plus large et le harcèlement y participe. Être également capable d'évaluer ou de connaître en tout cas les évolutions du harcèlement en fonction du développement des enfants et des adolescents. Et tout cela de manière interdisciplinaire, en regardant également comment ces éléments-là sont en interaction avec des logiques de discrimination plus larges qui sont également à l'œuvre dans la société. Un deuxième axe qui est celui de l'intervention, être capable de collaborer, d'identifier les méthodes, j'en parlais tout à l'heure, de tisser des liens aussi avec le contexte juridique, la question de la police par exemple, ou parfois ou aussi simplement la question de porter plainte est régulièrement mise à l'ordre du jour dans ce type de problématique. Et finalement, le troisième objectif qui est celui de la prévention, être capable de créer un environnement socio-éducatif positif, être capable de soutenir les compétences psychosociales des élèves et de tous les autres acteurs du système et soutenir la mise en place d'une culture de coexistence démocratique avec un travail sur l'inclusion, le respect de la diversité. Je vais terminer avec un lien avec la question des droits de l'enfant. Donc je le disais en introduction, c'est une problématique qui va affecter toute une série de droits des enfants. Le premier auquel on va pouvoir penser est celui de la protection de l'enfant et de sa possibilité de se développer, mais aussi la possibilité d'entrer dans des apprentissages, tout simplement, lorsque l'on n'est pas en sécurité. Il y a un enjeu à ce niveau-là. Mais je voulais surtout terminer sur le fait que dans le domaine du harcèlement, on voit aussi émerger la question de la participation des enfants. De plus en plus, les méthodes qui sont proposées, je vous en ai listé ici, mais je ne vais pas les détailler, mais l'enjeu, c'est de montrer à quel point on essaye de redonner la main aux enfants dans la gestion de leurs conflits, pas en partant dans la logique de dire ce sont des histoires d'enfants, on ne s'en préoccupe pas, mais au contraire de les accompagner en leur disant mais le problème que nous identifions et qu'on ne peut pas avoir ce type de situation à l'école, mais quelles sont les propositions que nous pouvons trouver ensemble, quelles sont vos solutions et comment est-ce que nous pouvons enrayer ce phénomène ensemble. Voilà, donc... J'en ai terminé. J'avais merci pour votre attention, mais je le dis oralement dans ce cas. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention.
Voilà, bonjour à tous. Je m'appelle Tilja Karat, je suis médiatrice familiale. J'ai fait mes études de médiation à Bramois, donc à l'Institut Courtebush à l'époque. Et aujourd'hui, je travaille pour une organisation qui s'occupe de protection internationale de l'enfant et de l'adulte, mais qui se comprend aussi et surtout comme une organisation de défense des droits de l'enfant. Donc, le sujet que vous me proposez d'aborder en quelques minutes me touche particulièrement parce que je pense qu'il y a une énorme corrélation entre la médiation et les droits de l'enfant et que la médiation, mais pas seulement la médiation, est vraiment un levier de mise en œuvre de la Convention des droits de l'enfant. Donc, je vais juste aborder 3 petits points. L'un, c'est on m'a demandé si je pouvais faire un peu une présentation des tendances que j'observais, moi, dans l'évolution de la médiation. Et pour ensuite parler très très brièvement sur la parallèle entre les droits de l'enfant et la médiation et surtout de la place de l'interdisciplinarité dans des dispositifs qui existent, pour ensuite en arriver à quelques défis que je constate parce que j'ai l'occasion d'intervenir aussi dans les HETS dans l'enseignement en fait des travailleurs sociaux et des travailleuses sociales et les médiateurs et médiatrices pour faire un peu part de mes constats. Donc, en ce qui concerne le développement de la médiation, ce que je constate depuis que j'ai étudié moi-même, la médiation, c'est qu'on est passé en fait d'un principe très très fort de l'adhésion volontaire dans les années 90 du siècle passé. La médiation a 30 ans. Aujourd'hui, plus ou moins, elle est née, la médiation familiale en Suisse est née en 1993. Plus ou moins le même âge que la Convention des droits de l'enfant. Et ce qu'on constate, c'est que là où à l'origine, en fait, le principe d'adhésion volontaire est extrêmement fort. On constate qu'aujourd'hui, en 2023, cette adhésion volontaire s'est transformée quelque part dans la possibilité d'exhorter à la médiation pour les tribunaux, voire de contraindre à la médiation, ce qui est assez intéressant et qui pourrait être discuté, évidemment. Ça, c'est un des constats. Le deuxième, c'est que de plus en plus de professionnels du droit, en fait, s'intéressent à la médiation, pratiquent la médiation. Et je voulais juste donner comme exemple que ici, dans le canton de Genève, en fait, en 2024, en janvier 2024, on a donc on a une nouvelle loi en fait qui va être mise en œuvre et qui montre en fait quelque part l'aboutissement des avancées de la médiation, puisque cette nouvelle loi prévoit en fait un dispositif de prévention de conflits, mais aussi d'intervention de conflits, c'est-à-dire que le canton offre 7 heures de médiation gratuite en amont d'une procédure, mais aussi en aval, pour tous les domaines du droit en fait. Donc le droit familial, pénal majeur, pénal mineur, bail, commercial, travail, tout. Et pour moi, c'est quelque part assez symbolique ou symptomatique de comment la médiation a finalement évolué très très rapidement vers un dispositif qui peut être utile et utilisé en fait par la justice. Ça veut dire aussi que, pour moi, cette évolution montre en fait que les autorités ont un énorme intérêt en fait à intégrer la médiation, mais pour créer en fait quelque part un dispositif interdisciplinaire dans leur contentieux, parce que on a constaté en fait qu'ils sont face à des défis que la loi seule ne peut pas réguler avec efficacité. Ensuite, évidemment, donc après, si on retourne un peu sur les fondements, la médiation et la Convention des droits de l'enfant, pour moi, c'est toujours cette question de regarder la protection et la participation, qui sont vraiment 2 piliers de la Convention des droits de l'enfant. Mais surtout, et ce qu'on ignore souvent, c'est que la Convention des droits de l'enfant, enfin, que ignore le grand public, pas ici, bien entendu, c'est que les articles de la Convention des droits de l'enfant, en fait, articulent meilleur intérêt, donc l'article 3 et participation, et que cette articulation est comme liées dans le sens où, effectivement, la participation renforce en fait la recherche de solutions pour le meilleur intérêt des enfants. Et souvent, on constate que les droits de l'enfant passent un peu à travers les mailles du filet au bénéfice de la protection. Et en fait, je pense que l'une des grandes questions aujourd'hui qu'on peut sonder, qu'on peut explorer, c'est vraiment dans quelle mesure protection et participation en fait ne sont pas antagonistes, mais participent bien en fait à la mise en œuvre d'une convention qui a été pensée comme ça, mais où en fait les dispositifs ou les pilotes, l'intervention est en cours en fait pour voir en fait comment faire dans la réalité. Et donc la médiation, évidemment, est un dispositif de participation, hein, et non seulement pour les enfants, mais aussi pour les parents, en fait, d'enfants. Si on prend l'exemple de la séparation, des procédures de séparation et de divorce, cette responsabilisation, en fait, est quelque part un effet aussi de notre temps, parce qu'on constate que les conflits ont beaucoup quitté la sphère du privé pour entrer dans la sphère publique, et que un dispositif de médiation aujourd'hui face aux autorités permet en fait de replacer l'expertise de sa propre situation donc dans le domaine privé, et c'est ce qui apparaît de plus en plus important. L'interdisciplinarité aussi. L'interdisciplinarité est un vecteur de mise en œuvre de la Convention des droits de l'enfant, et se note aussi justement dans les dispositifs actuels, que ce soit, pas seulement dans la protection de l'enfant, mais aussi dans d'autres dispositifs comme en fait un constat qu'on ne peut plus travailler en silo, et que cette concertation élargie entre professionnels et aussi en relation directe avec en fait les destinataires, hein, les gens qui sont impliqués et qui sont finalement concernés, semble être de plus en plus important, et c'est ce qui crée aussi des mesures des autorités qui sont basées sur les besoins des personnes et non plus sur des choses qui sont plus abstraites. Donc, peut-être, donc, si on regarde en termes de formation continue, hein, interdisciplinarité, c'est un vaste sujet. J'entends souvent dire les gens que l'interdisciplinarité est étudiée, mais qu'il manque encore une recherche de terrain pour en fait constater comment l'interdisciplinarité, qui est un grand postulat aujourd'hui pour améliorer les pratiques et régler un certain nombre de problèmes, mais qu'il manque encore l'action en fait ou la recherche-action qui montre en fait, et qui montre dans quelle mesure effectivement cette interdisciplinarité est utile donc à tous les intéressés. Et en fait, dans les formations que nous pouvons donner dans les HETS en travail social ou en médiation, on essaie toujours de montrer à quel point en fait le cadre juridique légal contraignant de la Convention des droits de l'enfant est en fait directement lié avec l'action des professionnels sur le terrain, et qu'on dit en fait à chaque travailleur social, à chaque éducateur, à chaque médiateur, à chaque médiatrice, de quelle manière, et c'est ce qu'on étudie ensuite pendant ces modules, de quelle manière en fait eux-mêmes sont un levier de mise en œuvre de cette Convention des droits de l'enfant, et on leur montre aussi que leur action n'est pas du tout déconnectée de ce cadre juridique international ratifié par tous les États du monde, mais que en fait il y a toute une série de recettes, hein, avec les instruments créés autour de cette Convention des droits de l'enfant, comme les observations générales, comme la revue des pays, comme la recherche autour de modèles d'application, et qu'en fait il y a un fil direct qui permet en fait de s'orienter comme professionnel de terrain, en fait de s'orienter ou de faire évoluer ses propres pratiques. Et dans les formations continues que nous donnons dans les écoles de travail social, c'est exactement ça qu'on cherche. Et on constate que pour l'interdisciplinarité, finalement, le cadre théorique est assez maigre, parce qu'en fait, c'est un travail qui s'attache surtout à la posture professionnelle, et ces postures professionnelles qui évoluent s'exercent en fait. Et on n'est plus en fait dans des résultats théorique, mais on est dans de l'expérience. Et ce que nous disait Christian tout à l'heure par rapport au modèle de consensus parental en Valais, on le voit en fait au quotidien, comment dans un modèle intégré qui place l'enfant au centre d'une procédure et qui prévoit toute une série de mesures qui placent l'enfant au centre des procédures. Mais ensuite, il y a aussi la posture des professionnels et ce dialogue nécessaire, régulier, pour affiner en fait la coopération, la concertation et pour travailler ensemble et créer des synergies, des vrais. Et donc voilà, pour cette Académie des droits de l'enfant qui est en train de se créer et qui se propose justement de travailler sur la formation continue, j'imagine, ou enfin je vois, si on me demandait mon avis, mon humble avis là-dessus, c'est que puisqu'avec cette méthodologie académicienne qui complète vraiment parfaitement les méthodologies peut-être des HETS, travailler en fait vraiment sur des modèles d'application de la Convention des droits de l'enfant à des métiers comme la médiation ou le travail social. Je peux vous donner un exemple que j'utilise beaucoup dans les cours. Il y a ce modèle de Lundy sur la participation. Je ne sais pas si vous le connaissez. Madame Lundy étant cette chercheuse écossaise, je crois, qui a travaillé sur un modèle d'application. Donc, elle a écrit un article qui dit « A voice is not enough ». Donc, en fait, donner le droit à la parole aux enfants n'est pas assez dans le cadre théorique. Comment est-ce qu'on peut le faire en réalité? Et là, se basant sur les observations générales sur l'article 12, elle développe en fait un modèle d'application. Et si on regarde ce modèle d'application, eh bien, on peut tout à coup le rattacher totalement directement à notre pratique, puisque pour la participation, on parle de la création d'un espace qui est neutre, qui est adéquat en fait à l'écoute ou au recueil de la parole de l'enfant, avec un professionnel qui est expérimenté, et s'assurer ensuite que ce que dit l'enfant est rapporté au juge et que l'enfant ait un retour sur comment son opinion a été prise en considération. Vous voyez, et puis ça, c'est des instruments qui sont tellement utiles en fait, qu'on peut utiliser et qu'on peut utiliser en fait à l'échelle nationale. Voilà, donc ça c'est un peu mes réflexions, et je vous souhaite vraiment toute l'énergie et le dynamisme pour démarrer avec ce beau projet. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Christian, Zoe, and Siglia. Now we would like to hear from our participants. Nous aimerions aussi vous écouter. Pour cela, nous avons prévu un questionnaire, un survey, qui serait accessible sur le QR code qui va vous être affiché dans un instant. So we would like to hear from you. That's why we developed this online pool of questions on continuous education needs that you can access using this QR code. So we will take about 5 minutes. It's a short questionnaire of 8 questions to fill it, for you to fill it up. On va prendre 5 à 8 minutes pour compléter ce questionnaire composé de 8 questions. Et juste après, nous ouvrons la séance de questions et réponses. Pour cela, j'invite tous nos intervenants à venir s'asseoir sur la table devant. Comme ça, vous êtes visible sur la caméra pour nos participants sur Zoom. After the Q&A, we will open the Q&A session. So I ask all the people, all the speakers during today's events to come and sit at the front table so you are visible to our participants online. While you continue filling up the questionnaire, we can open our Q&A session. So I would like to welcome our speakers on the front table so we can start. We have a few already questions from the group that is online. For those who are online, you can feel free either to unmute and ask your question after raising your hand, or you can write it down in the chat. We have access to it, so we can read it out loud here in the room. nous appelons la séance des questions et réponses. Durant cette séance, vous pouvez, pour ceux qui sont en ligne, vous pouvez, après avoir levé la main, demander votre question directement par micro, ou sinon, vous pouvez la demander par écrit et nous liserons la question à haute voix ici dans la salle. Pour ceux qui sont dans la salle, vous avez les microphones devant vous. Vous pouvez juste lever la main et cliquer sur le bouton pour pouvoir communiquer. For those who are in the room, you can unmute yourself, also unmute the mic that is in front of you and ask your question, of course, also after raising the hand. So we can start maybe with a question. Do we have any questions in the room that you would like to start with? We have a few online, so maybe we can start with those.
Thank you. I'm going to read online questions. So the first one will be from Ishato, and I apologize if I'm mispronounce your name. So the question is, countless children are denied access to education as a result of poverty and hardship, and further inequalities exist in the gender imbalance among those who do not participate in school. What can be done to make governments respect their commitments to children's rights to continuous education?
Thank you so much, and I hope I got the question fully correct. Children access to education. I think there was an example said earlier about where, for their legal status, children denied accessing certain rights, and it comes first, education indeed. If I speak from my position as working in refugee setting mostly, this is really has to do with advocacy at the first stage of our work, in terms of how we ensure that children, regardless of their legal status, let it be asylum seeker, refugee, or even migrants, although this is not an area of our work, but they do enjoy their rights to the fullest. So advocacy is the key point, support to systems, because as I mentioned, if I just limited this now to forced displacement situation, as I said earlier, the impact on national system is huge. Countries receive over 1 million or 100,000 of refugees, asylum seekers, or even internal displaced. This put a pressure on their national system. The capacity to absorb additional needs is massive. So it's about, when we do advocacy, it's really about speaking to how we can support government. It's not only about just laws and policies, which is indeed equally important, but also resources in place. Usually, if we limit our advocacy just to changes of policies, procedures, and strategies, without really ensuring they also have access, and this speaks to development as well, that they have the capacity to absorb the additional needs, then we are actually not achieving much. So I think that the question could be addressed from different angles, but if I bring it just where we have like forced displacement and situation where we impact and the influx has its impact on the communities, the systems, the services, there is a lot need to be taken into consideration while working with governments and states in ensuring the inclusion of children who are displaced into their services, including education, but also health and so forth. So those elements has to be considered. The importance of having a common understanding of the different needs. In addition to that example, language, for example, a huge barrier in accessing education system in a country. If I'm a refugee, for example, from Afghanistan or from Syria arriving in a country, or this is not the language, then the official language is not the one I'm using, so it's indeed a challenge. So that also adds to the already challenging situation and limited resources of the receiving country. So as agencies and humanitarian actors, for us it's about understanding the barriers So we are able to advocate, it's evidence-based advocacy, as we said. We advocate correctly what exactly we need to advocate for and how and what support is required. I will stop here, but I think there could be other colleagues who would like to address this question from their angle as well. Thank you.
Other questions?
There is another one in the chat, and this will be in French. Comment mieux impliquer l'enfant avec l'interdisciplinarité et la recherche-action dans le contexte des innovations du numérique?
Oui, alors merci beaucoup pour cette question. C'est vrai que la question de la place de l'enfant dans la recherche est une question qui fait l'objet de réflexions, débats et recherches depuis maintenant un moment. Et on a des modèles qui permettent effectivement soit de s'assurer d'avoir à minima une véritable prise en compte de l'enfant et de ses besoins dans le cadre des méthodologies développées. Donc là, on parlera tout de même d'une recherche sur les enfants, mais avec des méthodes le plus participatives possible et qui soient le plus adaptées aux besoins, en particulier si je pense au public des jeunes enfants qui ont peut-être une préférence, dirons-nous, pour des moyens ou des méthodes plus médiatisé et moins direct, c'est-à-dire un intervieweur adulte face à un jeune enfant qui n'a pas la maîtrise du langage, une maîtrise similaire du langage que nous, par exemple. Et puis, si on va un pas plus loin, il y a la question de la recherche qui est conduite avec les enfants, où là, on essaye véritablement sur les modèles de recherche transdisciplinaire que l'on appliquerait également pour impliquer, par exemple, des professionnels dans nos recherches ou des partenaires de la société civile. Mais donc, sur le même mode de réflexion, une possibilité de créer des groupes, par exemple, d'enfants co-chercheurs qui accompagnent les chercheurs dans toutes les étapes de la recherche. Alors, ça peut aller de la formulation du projet de recherche jusqu'à la valorisation, la diffusion et même la co-rédaction des résultats de la recherche, y compris dans des publications à caractère scientifique, et toutes les étapes de la recherche qui vont entre. Voilà, c'est également un sujet sur lequel on pourrait, comme ma collègue disait juste avant, s'étendre longuement. Peut-être juste avoir à l'esprit la question de l'éthique. Il y a vraiment des enjeux importants au niveau éthique lorsque l'on veut impliquer les enfants, soit comme acteurs du processus de recherche, soit comme co-chercheurs. Et là aussi, on a même des checklists extrêmement efficaces qui nous permettent de nous assurer qu'on a véritablement un consentement éclairé, qu'on a véritablement réussi à limiter le nombre de gatekeepers, qu'on n'est pas en train de faire taire des enfants dont la voix serait nécessaire pour avoir une vision complète de l'objet de recherche. Voilà, je m'arrêterai là.
Merci Zoé. Do you have other questions from maybe the people in the room? Any other question online, Annie?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but I think it's for Professor Hart, which I'm not sure if he's still online. I don't know. No, but anyway, maybe Dr. Roberto can answer it actually. It has to do with a statement that Professor Hart made around authentic governments and how we can essentially see the creation of governments that are more sensitive to children's rights. And within that context as well, my question has to do with how do we see governments working with business to facilitate this therapeutic environment, communities and countries that children can grow in and thrive as children. So I just wonder, what are some of the immediate practical tools that we can think about in really trying to imagine, therapeutic governments, but in more so working together with business.
Go ahead, Roberta. I'm preparing the statistics.
Okay, I can start, but you complete if needed. I would say it would take probably a couple of hours to do the list of all the components that we have to take into consideration when we talk about the state's responsibility towards children's rights fulfillment while dealing with businesses, no? And the actors that works in that context. What I could say that what we see most often is that business actors are more responsive and pay more attention to the rights, to the fulfillment of the rights of the child and respect them better in the moment in which there is a regulatory framework, a framework that regulates the intervention and the activities of these actors at the national level. The fact of having a sort, they are not the addresses of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. This treaty is not talking directly to them, but it talks and obliges states parties to set up a framework that regulates the work and the activities of those actors. So it can be in support of children's rights. They can become indeed actors of this implementation chain of children's rights, but under, I would say, the first and prior responsibility of states party to regulate their activity.
Two other observations also on this topic. One is related to the contribution of financial contribution of businesses into children's rights, and we noticed that most of businesses' contribution go to service-related rights, so education, health. But when it comes to protection, when it comes to participation of children, this is lacking behind. So there is too little done in that aspect. And the second observation is in terms of contribution to, well, when you look at the contribution of the fundraising that NGOs and the UN agency does that work on children's rights, we notice that it's still a minor contribution from their funds that come from corporates. So there is, of course, a major fund that come from government, then another fund that come from individual, and it's very substantial. So individuals that contribute monthly with a small portion from times 10, $20, this ends up in like a huge sum. But when it comes to comparing this to the business sector contribution towards these budgets, it's like a 1/4 of what individuals contribute with. And this is another aspect where basically corporates can do more. And the third point is in relation to their monitoring and responsibility towards children with services they provide. And here also we notice that often it is inaccessible. So children to kind of raise complaint to companies about services or product that could be harming them is almost inexistent.
So very quickly also, from where I sit, business are in the past were not really our main target when we speak about child rights. We don't speak to them about it. We don't see how we can support them in making sure their own internal regulations, procedures, etc., is actually built and support and promote children's rights. So I think it's also about us, because I want to put this as a shared responsibility, us not being systematically reaching. And now there is increase within the social corporate responsibility, increased engagement with businesses to make it more rights-centered in their approaches. But I would say that this was not the case. So kind of somehow also disassociating ourselves because we can't control them, we don't know, oh, this is kind of accountability, etc. But I would say also there is a responsibility on the other end of how we bring in businesses and corporates to become one of our main targets as well, because it's an issue of understanding and knowledge and comprehension of what is it for them. So that's kind of just a quick element that also, if we want them to be held accountable, we also need to bring them on board. Sorry, over.
Peut-être juste en complément aux deux questions qui ont été posées, c'est vrai que si on pense notamment au domaine du numérique et l'utilisation des téléphones portables chez les enfants en Suisse, c'est quand même surprenant que Swisscom est un des financeurs de la plupart de ces études. Donc c'est un des principaux opérateurs en Suisse. Et c'est vrai que ça questionne. Enfin, moi, des fois, je fais souvent le lien entre les cigarettiers à l'époque qui finançaient les études sur la dangerosité du tabac par rapport à l'utilisation de la cigarette. Et je me dis, peut-être que là, il y a aussi des fois, j'ai l'impression qu'on a un peu de peine à prendre un peu de la distance. Et c'est vrai qu'il faudrait beaucoup de prudence, en tout cas, quand on associe le principal opérateur et l'objet en question, notamment quand on touche à l'enfant.
Just on the business, but a quick, I would say, institutional I thought. So in our Master of Advanced Studies, we do include some lectures on business and children's rights. We call a colleague, Gamze Turkeli, who's at the University of Antwerp, who wrote a great book on businesses and children's rights, and has a rather critical approach also. And then there is colleagues here in Switzerland. We have worked together with Christine Kaufmann in Zurich, who has a Center for Business and Human Rights within the law faculty, and also here in the University of Geneva, there is a Center for Businesses and Human Rights within the Geneva School for Management, so economics and management. So there are indeed, and I was from the question and how it developed, I thought, oh, maybe we should develop a class or something, or training on business and children's rights, because it is indeed, there's many questions that are coming up. And I would say, in between a very naive idea where you just go to business and say, hey, you have all the money, pay, and then and the business, of course, they like it because that's the way of how they show it. And the other extreme, where we would say, oh, well, they're all capitalists at the end of the day, so there's nothing we have to expect from them. Maybe there are places in between, and I think continuous education programs can be very interesting places to explore. But I guess, well, even, of course, we have the Global Social Compact, but for me, this is still a rather rhetorical, they should and they want to, and we see the philanthropists coming in and businesses, but I think there's a lot of more work that can be done, both research, but also in continuous education, in trying to avoid both traps, so not to fall into a too easy promotional talk about businesses they're now the solution to all problems children have. I don't think that works. But at the other hand, there is this critical perspective on businesses that might be sometimes also too critical towards. I do think there's some genuine businesses who think it's important for them also to engage there. But then it's a bit looking where the middle ground is between these two. So that would be our CAS. When is it we're going to launch it? 2025? Just that. Let's hope for some.
I think there was just one part of my question that wasn't, I think I probably asked two questions in one by mistake. Sorry about that, but I do appreciate the responses on the connection between business and children's rights. I think that's really great. But I think what's quite interesting for me was the therapeutic governments and what that looks like and what it means. I wish Professor Hart was here. But the idea of therapeutic governments and how governments can create therapeutic environments. And I say this because from where I come from, we're seeing more and more violence being done by children. So children become violent in society. And that's because of the trauma that they either grow up in or because of the societies that they find themselves in are violent. So automatically they also respond in different ways into violence or crime. So I'm quite interested in knowing then, because I think the idea of a therapeutic government is quite essential from a point of healing, from a point of restorative justice, but more so from a point of understanding that we do have traumatic countries. We do have countries that create trauma for children. But how do those children then come out of that trauma? You can think of migration, you can think of climate change. All of these incidences create trauma. But then how do governments then create the therapeutic environment?
Gloria, do you have an answer to this question?
Simon, yeah, she's probably unmuting.
She's unmuting, yeah.
Yes. Hi, Gloria.
Yes, I don't have an answer to this question, unfortunately, but perhaps if I may, since I have the floor, I wanted to come back to another question that was posed earlier regarding children and the new technologies. I think this is a very interesting field that we might want to explore, and I'm curious to hear also from the CRA what they think about, what you think about it. I see a number of challenges in relation to children. We know that children might get addicted to their iPhones, to their computers, to video games. So that there is a health issue in terms of illnesses, pathologies. We heard about the bullying and harassment, which is something also that is very present online. So I think the challenges are numerous. At the same time, definitely these new technologies are going to bring opportunities. We see how they are being used also in primary schools. There is a current discussion in Geneva about that. And we know that children are also more attuned to the new technologies, the new developments that occur online. So I think that it is potentially a theme of great interest, and I was happy to see that in the questionnaire you posed at the end, that was one of the themes that you proposed. So I would be curious to hear. So I finish with a question to Roberta and Carl. I'm curious to hear what you think about this theme.
Merci, Carl. Thanks, Gloria. But I would say, as Carl was saying, there is indeed an interest in terms, there is a need as well in terms of learning needs in the sector. But we should avoid to follow in the trap you were referring to before, Carl. So the idea that so there is space to train people in the sectors, but we have to also make an evaluation of what is the interest of the sectors for the subjects. And the interest of the sector in the subject, and after I'll pass it to you, Carl, is directly related to the I would say the state's policy in the governmental and national policy in that direction. Because based on the study that we did with Business and Human Rights Center of the University of Geneva for the Global Compact and for the UNICEF on the subject, what is emerging is indeed that there is an interest within the business sectors if there is a policy that is strong and is adopted at the national level in that direction. Carl?
Yeah. I think the question is interesting. I would take it almost as an example to, well, these are discussions we had, and Roberta has a very fantastic tool that she developed where you can also see, well, there is a learning need in the field of childhood, children's rights, but then are we in a capacity to answer that need? So we do need to be aware also that on this topic, for instance, there are colleagues at the University of Geneva in TECFA, at the Faculty of Psychology and Educational Sciences, who work on these and so we can identify learning needs, but then we also have to look what is our own luggage, what do we have as strengths? Did we do research on these topics? Have we something to say? Or, because the risk in setting up a platform like ours would also be like, let's respond to any need that there is. But then the risk is in turning into a platform that organizes events, which is only part of the equation. I do think we need to always look at also what do we have something special to offer on these topics? And if not by ourselves, maybe in partnering up, so that's the whole idea of partnerships, which we have been developing in the example of child protection in the Swiss context, where we work with schools of social work and us, and I think this is an added value of the partnership. But maybe, and it's just hypothetical, I mean, the question is, while we agree that there are many learning needs around technology and devices and how they are used by children, how it affects their development, how they can use it to get... I'm not sure at the moment that we as a center have developed sufficiently robust research and insights into the topic to be able to say we can offer this in our portfolio. Maybe we could include it as an element but then I think we should at the time, need to rely a bit on other people. And well, but then maybe the strongest part, but that we do have is when it is linked to the school bullying. So there is a training program at the Haute École Pédagogique Valais together with us, and so that's an example of this partnership. But it's school bullying, and that of course extends also now to the internet use, etc. But it's the angle is school bullying because there at the CIDE we have done, colleagues around the table here have done important research on these topics. So that is something, that's something we could think of. But the whole area, that would be, I guess, we need to be aware also that we can't go in we will not be able to fulfill every new learning need alone, or just even in partnership, that sometimes we might not be the right partner. I mean, we need to make choices. We set up 1, 2 new trainings now. We can't set up 7 or 10 per year. I mean, so it'll be also a question of choices, and that's the idea of I think the importance of linking it also with what happens in the institute or within the CIDE, that with the research that we are producing to make sure that we remain there somewhere to that links. That would be my take on it. My take on it.
I have 2 final questions in the chat. The first is, can you please elaborate a bit more on the research plans, so plans for research?
Well, but there's another strict agenda. So we have a number of colleagues. So they are the idea is when you are a university professor, you have time, and you have more than time. You are incited to, you have to develop research, and so we have a portfolio of research themes on which in the center we work more broadly. So I would, if you situate colleague Daniel Stöcklin, who's a sociologist of childhood, who's here working on the capability approach, children in street situations, well-being of children more globally, now also climate change and children's well-being. So that's one strand of research that is going on. There's Frédéric Darbellet, he works primarily within the epistemology of inter and transdisciplinarity. That's a bit more abstract to start with, but in fact it has very, very important and practical implications also, like for instance in education, and how can you today reflect on ranging from basic education to higher education, how interdisciplinarity can be vectors for creativity, how you can look at school climate. I'm looking also to a colleague here who works on these things. So that's a strand around interdisciplinarity, the epistemology of interdisciplinarity, education, creative education. Zoe, who's also around the table, who worked on school bullying. So we get still back to children's rights education a bit, but also working with children as researchers. So there's themes that are going on. And then I would say my own research, which I situate in the broad field of children's rights studies and a more critical approach to the discourse and policies internationally made. But I'm not going to detail the whole. And there's other people. I see Natalia, who's also in the room. And I must, maybe that's not the scoop. So today we launched the Children's Rights Academy, and as a Center for Children's Rights Studies, we are planning to also launch something robust where we can show the different research entities within the children's rights, within the Center for Children's Rights Studies. But that's something that we can work on also in structuring it. But I hope it answers. It's a broad answer around the themes, and I'm sorry if I forgot some colleagues who are working, like in Roberta, who's working on the policy interface between the legal norms and the policy, and how that evolves around institutions like the Children's Ombudsperson or independent human rights institutions. So it's a broad range of themes we try to follow up.
The next question is, what is the method for decolonizing the knowledge shared, and how is this going to be part of the pedagogy of the Children's Rights Academy?
So, but yeah, I'll take the question. I think it's interesting. We have been discussing enormously about this component. In practice, I could have added other example to the list of new programs, but a way to, because there are other programs, of course, on which we are working today. And a really concrete manner in which we work on decolonialization is by developing continuing education program in partnership with actors that are, I would say, are in countries that I would in countries in the south, in the south of part of the globe. To give you an example, is the cas en protection de l'enfance avec the University of Cantadiop. No, Sheikh Anta Diop, UCAD. And I hope, I don't know if the colleagues are still connected with us. This program we have is long, it dates back to a long time ago. It's one of the programs that was part of the portfolio of the CIDE and in collaboration with other institutions since a long time. Now we are just reorganizing, restructuring this program, and in order to pay attention to this component of decolonialization, the intention, the idea is to, first of all, to decentralize, to move in Dakar, for example, the pedagogical coordination of the program. We are reorganizing the procedure through which we determine the content of the program in order to be able to be as close as possible, to give more space to the colleague in Dakar, in the context in which the training is offered, to have the possibility to shape, to inform the content of our program on the basis of the learning needs of professionals in the child protection sector there explicitly at local level. Carl, you want to add?
I wanted to just add, we had recently with the journal Childhood a webinar on this question, and that webinar will soon be on the website, and there will be in November a conversation around teaching global childhoods in the university. So that's a source where you can go to further reflect on the teaching of the global childhood, and the whole debate around decoloniality of knowledge is included in that. Very, very interesting discussion. So you will be able to see it very soon as a recorded webinar, but there's also a written interview or conversation that will be published soon, before the end of the year, in the journal Childhood. That was free publicity. Thank you.
Just to close it, just to align again how research and is accompanying and shaping the vision of the CRA and informing afterwards the practice. I don't know if they are still online, but I take the chance to thank also Riccardo Cappelletti and Ian Hopford that I guess are following us today, that together with us are developing it's the first time for the CRA, but it's also this renovative approach to decolonialization, to training development. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Roberta. We have a final question, I think, from the room. Ron?
Yeah. Now, it's a question that was in the questionnaire, actually, which is around hybrid, in-person, or online learning. And I just wanted to know what's your experience in terms of learning outcomes? What works best for adult education and continuous learning?
So thanks for the question. It's an interesting one, and I don't think that there is a straightforward answer. It depends, I would say, on the content of the program, the training we are referring to, and the accessibility to it that we can offer, or we need to offer to a certain specific professional group that is at the target of the training, that is at the receiving end of that training. So I cannot say that online is more effective than in presence or vice versa. In our experience, we have, I would say, a lot of professionals that were eager, for example, to attend, to participate in a program, and could indeed only do it when we started to offer it online. But other than that, at the same time, can complain for the absence of, I would say, of a strong, more direct interaction. In terms of knowledge and content, I think both of them can work out really well. Is a question of how shaping the content, the transfer of the knowledge through a tool or another one. But on a human base, of course, there are certain differences.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. With this, I close the question and answer session. I just want to show you the results of the survey quickly, which basically could give kind of also extension to the answer to Ron. So in terms of first of topics, it's interesting to see that topics related to child protection related policies are among the top. So child protection policies and systems comes as one, and evidence-based children rights policies and policy evaluation comes also in the top 5. And then we see that children rights to participate is ranking as the second most important topic. So that's really interesting to observe. Then we have political responsibility, implementation of children's rights. And after that, we have kind of equal percentages between childhood studies, education, and children's rights, and more the thematic approaches of children's rights and sustainable development. So, and then when it comes to competencies and soft skills, here we can see that communication skills come as a top 1, and understanding relationship between seemingly unrelated events come as 2, and the third is working as part of a team, demonstrating leadership, coaching, encouraging people to learn, building and maintaining networks and relationships. When it comes to the modalities of continuous education programs, we see that for the majority, spreading the training days is better than having them in a sequence, but it's not a very different percentage from the one that prefer a sequence. For the majority, it is important that the continuous education program are certified by university credits. And when it comes to the modality of face-to-face versus distance learning, we see that the majority prefers actually a combination of both. And in terms of second, it would be face-to-face training rather than only distant learning. In terms of balance between theory and practice, the answer that gets the most the highest percentage is 50-50, which is fair enough when it comes to continuous education. So just that's a bit to kind of reflect the views of the participants today. With that, I leave the floor to Carl to close our lunch event.
Je vais le faire en français si ça vous va. Comme ça, on mélange un peu. Et je voulais surtout vous remercier à tout le monde d'avoir pris le temps d'y être cet après-midi. Les personnes qui sont intervenues lors des différentes tables rondes, à la fois ici, and the people who are following us at a distance also. Well, and thanks for bearing with us with these language questions or switching from the one to the other. Mais je vous remercie participants, je remercie particulièrement mes collègues aussi du CID qui sont venus massivement jusqu'ici. Ça nous change une fois de nos bureaux habituels à Sion, donc c'est aussi très... Enfin, je vous remercie aussi à tous et toutes d'être là. Et juste pour conclure, je voulais vous montrer comment ces métaphores un peu iconiques de l'université, comment c'est génial ces trucs, parce qu'on peut les décliner dans toutes les formes, dans toutes les sens. Prenons le pont. Simon, c'est un fantastique pont. Il fait le pont entre la pratique et la théorie, déjà en lui-même, et je le remercie beaucoup pour tout son travail qu'il fait pour la CRA, pour le Children's Rights Academy. Pour vous l'illustrer, on pense toujours à l'université, on forme des gens, et puis après, ça doit être utile pour la société. Alors Simon, c'est un peu différent. Lui, il travaillait pour l'UNICEF, il a appris plein de choses, et nous, on l'utilise parce qu'il nous apprend plein de choses qui sont utiles pour l'université. Donc là, la pratique nous est très, très, très utile, et puis la pratique de travailler avec Simon est particulièrement réussie. Donc je remercie Simon. Je vous ai aussi parlé d'une tour. Nous, au Children's Rights Academy, on a une tour, on a un secrétariat avec Hortense Offert qui est là encore, ou je vais parler à Hortense alors à travers le... Enfin, une tour, c'est aussi un pilier qui, dans les formations continues que nous avons offertes, on a besoin de cette stabilité, d'une personne qui arrive à tenir un peu debout et ensemble. Il y a énormément de règles à respecter, il y a des sollicitations de partout, il y a des délais à garder. Et donc ce pilier qu'est Hortense, mais aussi un tour sous forme d'un phare qui nous illumine et qui avec sa gaieté, sa joie de vivre et sa présence, est là. Et enfin, bien sûr, il y a la géante Roberta Ruggiero qui est notre... Bah oui, sur les épaules des géants, ben à partir de maintenant, Roberta, on va s'appuyer sur tes grandes épaules ou sur tes épaules. Et en tout cas, je te remercie énormément pour tout le courage que tu as eu, pour l'énergie que tu as mis, la vista que tu as mis dans la création de ce Children's Rights Academy, qui est quand même en grande partie aussi le fruit de tes actions et de ton engagement pour amener ce... Donc, mais j'ai, enfin, les tours et les ponts, et je ne sais pas s'il y en a que j'ai oublié. Il y a peut-être une dernière image iconique, c'est que l'apéritif, quand même, il faut qu'on termine aussi par ces éléments un peu plus informels d'échange. Donc, j'ai l'honneur, le plaisir de vous inviter tous à traverser cette porte où il devrait nous... On est réservé, enfin, il y a un apéritif là de l'autre côté. So, thanks a lot to everybody and have a nice end of the day.